I was bleeding out in a crumpled SUV on the side of I-85 while my mother was trying on a swimsuit for a cruise I paid for. That is the sentence that defines the end of my relationship with my family. My name is Jasmine Reynolds, and for 10 years I was the bank account that funded my parents' retirement and my sister's delusions of grandeur. I thought buying them a house and sending $5,000 a month bought me love or at least loyalty. I was wrong. When I called my mother from the trauma unit begging her to pick up my 7-week-old son because I was being rushed into emergency surgery, she sighed and told me I was being selfish. She said my sister Bianca needed this vacation more than I needed support. She chose a buffet line over her grandson's safety. So while the anesthesia was kicking in, I made one final phone call that cost them $540,000 and left them homeless. But before I tell you how I systematically destroyed their comfortable lives, let me know where you are watching from in the comments below. Hit like and subscribe if you have ever realized that your biggest haters were the people sitting at your dinner table. The world did not go black when the 18-wheeler clipped my back bumper. It went red. A violent spinning blur of red and gray as my Range Rover flipped over the concrete median of the interstate. The sound was the worst part. It wasn't just the screech of metal on asphalt, but the sickening crunch of the roof collapsing inward. Then silence. A heavy, suffocating silence that lasted for exactly 3 seconds before it was shattered by the sound that still wakes me up in a cold sweat. The high-pitched, terrified scream of my 7-week-old son Leo. I was hanging upside down. The seatbelt was digging into my chest so hard I could barely breathe, and there was a warm, metallic taste filling my mouth. Blood. It was running into my eyes, blinding me, but I didn't care about the pain radiating from my left leg. My motherly instinct overrode the shock. I tried to turn my head, tried to reach back toward the car seat, but my body wouldn't move. My leg was pinned under the crushed dashboard. Leo. I gasped the word coming out as a wet cough. Mommy is here. Mommy is here. His cries were getting louder, more desperate. I clawed at the door handle with my left hand, my fingernails breaking against the plastic, but the door was jammed shut. The smell of gasoline began to drift into the cabin, sharp and terrifying. Panic, cold, and absolute washed over me. I was a senior partner at one of Atlanta's top commercial law firms. I solved impossible problems for a living. I fixed things. But I could not fix this. I could not reach my baby. Help! I screamed, my voice cracking. Somebody help us! I heard sirens in the distance growing louder. Shadows flickered outside the shattered window. A face appeared, a firefighter with kind eyes but a grim expression. "Ma'am, don't move," he said, his voice muffled through the glass. "We are going to get you out. Is there anyone else in the car?" "My baby?" I choked out, tears mixing with the blood on my face. "My baby is in the back. Get him first. Please, just get him." I remember the sound of the jaws of life prying the door open, the grinding of metal that vibrated through my own bones. I remember the moment the firefighter reached into the back and pulled the carrier out. I strained my neck, ignoring the shooting agony in my femur just to catch a glimpse of Leo. He was still crying, his little face red and contorted, but he was moving. He was alive. "We are taking him to the ambulance to get checked out," the firefighter said, turning back to me. "Now let's get you out of there, Jasmine." The next hour was a blur of flashing lights and agonizing movement. They cut me out of the vehicle. I remember looking at my leg and seeing the angle of my thigh, a shape that no leg should ever take. But the physical pain was distant, muted by the adrenaline and the overwhelming need to be with my son. In the back of the ambulance, I tried to sit up. "Where is he? Where is Leo?" "He is in the other ambulance, ma'am," the paramedic said, pushing me gently back down. "He is stable. No visible injuries, just shaken up. But you have lost a lot of blood. You need to stay with us." "My husband. I need to call my husband." The paramedic handed me my phone. The screen was cracked, spider webs of glass covering the display, but it still lit up. My hands were shaking so hard I could barely unlock it. I dialed Tyrell. It went straight to voicemail. Hey, this is Tyrell. I am currently in Tokyo for the Pacific Rim Conference and will be on a 14-hour flight. Leave a message. I hung up. I had forgotten. He had boarded his flight 3 hours ago. He was 30,000 feet in the air over the Pacific Ocean, completely unreachable. I was alone. We arrived at Grady Memorial Hospital, and the chaos of the trauma center swallowed me whole. Doctors were shouting orders, nurses were cutting my clothes off, and machines were beeping in a rhythmic, frantic tempo. A orthopedic surgeon hovered over me, looking at the x-rays that had been rushed over. Ms. Reynolds, you have a compound fracture of the femur and internal bleeding in your abdomen, he said, his voice urgent. We need to get you into surgery immediately. Wait. I grabbed his scrub top, my grip weak. My son, Leo. He is 7 weeks old. He is here somewhere. I need to see him. A head nurse, a stern woman with a clipboard, stepped forward. Her name tag read Brenda. The baby is in pediatrics being observed, she said. He is fine, honey. But here is the problem. You are going under general anesthesia for at least 6 hours. Your husband is not answering. We cannot leave an infant without a guardian. Child Protective Services is already on their way to take temporary custody until you wake up, unless you have family who can come right now. The words Child Protective Services hit me harder than the car crash. A foster home. Strangers holding my Leo. Absolutely not. No, I rasped. No CPS. I have family. My parents. They live 20 minutes away in Buckhead. I bought them the house. They will come. Nurse Brenda handed me my cracked phone. You have 2 minutes before we wheel you back. Make the call. I scrolled to the contact labeled Mom and pressed call. I let out a breath I didn't know I was holding. My mother Patricia would be dramatic. She would probably lecture me about driving too fast, even though I wasn't, but she would come. She was his grandmother. This was what family did. The phone rang 4 times. Then I heard the click. Reynolds' residence. Patricia speaking. Her voice was breathless, distracted. In the background, I could hear upbeat jazz music and the distinct sound of a zipper being pulled up. Mom, I said, my voice trembling. Mom, I was in an accident. Oh, Jasmine, honestly? She sighed, the annoyance instant and sharp. Can this wait? I am in the middle of a fitting. Bianca is having a crisis with her bikini top. It is too loose, and we leave for the port in 2 hours. I froze. The pain in my leg throbbed, syncing with the beat of my heart. Mom, listen to me. I am at Grady Memorial. My car flipped. My leg is snapped in half. I am going into emergency surgery right now. There was a pause. Not a pause of shock, but a pause of processing inconvenience. Well, are you okay? You sound fine. You are talking. I am not fine, Mom, I screamed, causing the nurses to look over. Tyrell is on a plane to Japan. I need you to come to the hospital, now. Leo is here. He is alone. The hospital says if no one is here to claim him, they are calling CPS. I need you to watch him while I am in surgery. I heard her muffle the phone, speaking to someone else. It was my sister Bianca. I could hear her whine clear as day. Mom, tell her to figure it out. If we miss the check-in time, we lose the reservation. I have been planning this trip for 6 months. I need to relax. My mother came back on the line. Jasmine, look, we simply cannot come right now. The car is packed. The limo is downstairs. This is a $5,000 cruise, honey. We can't just throw that money away because you had a fender bender. It is not a fender bender. I sobbed, the reality of her words crashing into me. I am going into surgery. My baby is going to be taken by strangers. Mom, please. I pay for the house you are standing in. I pay for the car you are taking to the port. I paid for the damn cruise. Just come get your grandson. Don't you dare throw money in my face. Patricia snapped, her voice turning cold. You always do this. You think because you have a fancy law degree you can control us. Bianca has been under so much stress lately since she lost her job. She needs this break. You are strong, Jasmine. You always figure it out. You can hire a nanny or a nurse. You have plenty of money. Mom, he is 7 weeks old. Stop being so dramatic. We will send you a postcard. Call us when you wake up. Click. She hung up. I stared at the screen, the call duration showing 1 minute and 42 seconds. That was the value of my life to her. 1 minute and 42 seconds of inconvenience before she chose a buffet and a poolside lounge chair over her injured daughter and helpless grandson. The surgeon stepped back in. Ms. Reynolds, we can't wait anymore. Your blood pressure is dropping. We have to go. Tears, hot and angry, streamed down my face. I looked at Nurse Brenda. Her face had softened. She had heard enough of the conversation to understand. I don't have family coming, I whispered, my voice turning to steel. But I have money. I opened my banking app with trembling fingers. I want to hire a private duty pediatric nurse from this hospital's VIP registry, I told Brenda. I don't care what it costs. Triple rate. Someone sits with my son every second until I wake up. And Brenda? Yes, honey. If a woman named Patricia Reynolds shows up later pretending to care, security does not let her in. I watched the nurse nod, writing it down. Then the anesthesia mask was placed over my face. As the darkness took me, I didn't feel fear anymore. I didn't feel sadness. I felt a cold, hard rage settling in my chest, replacing the space where my heart used to be. My mother wanted a vacation, fine. I was about to make sure it was the most expensive vacation she ever took. Because when I woke up, the Bank of Jasmine was going to be permanently closed. The anesthesia wore off in slow, agonizing waves, dragging me from a darkness where I felt no pain into a reality where my leg felt like it was being crushed by a hydraulic press. My eyes fluttered open, adjusting to the harsh fluorescent lights of the recovery room. The beep of the heart monitor was the only sound, a steady, rhythmic reminder that I was still alive. My throat felt like sandpaper, dry and raw from the breathing tube they must have just removed. I tried to speak, but it came out as a groan. A face appeared above me. It was Nurse Brenda, the same woman who had taken my instructions before I went under. Her expression was guarded, her eyes filled with a mixture of professional detachment and something that looked dangerously like pity. I hated pity. I had spent my entire life overachieving, graduating top of my class at Howard, making partner before 30, just to avoid ever having anyone look at me with pity. Water, I croaked. She held a cup with a straw to my lips. I drank greedily, the cool liquid soothing the fire in my throat. As the fog in my brain began to lift, the memories of the crash came flooding back. The spinning car, the blood, Leo screaming. Leo! I whispered, gripping the bed rail. Where is my son? He is safe, Jasmine, Brenda said softly, placing a hand on my shoulder. He is in the VIP pediatric suite, just like you asked. The private nurses are with him. He is eating and sleeping. He is perfectly fine. I exhaled a sob, catching in my chest. He was safe. I closed my eyes for a moment, letting that relief wash over me. But then the second wave of memory hit. The phone call. The cruise. My mother. I opened my eyes and looked around the room. It was empty. There were no flowers on the bedside table. There was no coat draped over the chair. There was no Patricia Reynolds pacing the floor, complaining about the hospital coffee. Did they come, I asked, though I already knew the answer. Brenda pursed her lips and checked the IV drip, avoiding my gaze. No, honey. No one checked in at the front desk for you. Security has been on alert, but nobody named Patricia or Desmond has tried to enter the building. The confirmation hit me harder than the airbag had. It was one thing to be dismissed over the phone when things were chaotic. It was another thing entirely to wake up 6 hours later after major orthopedic surgery and realize that my parents had actually followed through on their threat. They had actually chosen a boat over my bedside. Hand me my phone, I said, my voice hardening. You need to rest, Jasmine. You just came out of give me the phone, Brenda. Please. She reached into the plastic bag containing my personal effects and handed me the shattered device. The screen was cracked, but it still worked. I unlocked it and saw a notification from Instagram. It was a story update from Bianca posted 40 minutes ago. My thumb hovered over the icon. I shouldn't look. I knew I shouldn't look. But I needed to see it. I needed the visual proof of their betrayal to burn away the last lingering shreds of hope I held for this family. I tapped the screen. The video filled the cracked display. It was a selfie video taken in the back of a luxury SUV. Bianca was holding the camera high using a filter that made her skin look flawless and her eyes sparkle. She was wearing a wide-brimmed sun hat and giant sunglasses. "Hey guys, we are finally here," Bianca squealed at the camera. "Port of Miami, baby. We are about to board the royal seas for a week of paradise. I am so ready to disconnect and recharge." She panned the camera to the left. My mother was sitting there applying lipstick in the compact mirror. She looked annoyed but not worried. She looked like a woman concerned with her appearance, not a woman whose daughter was currently being stitched back together. "Mom, say hi to the vlog," Bianca chirped. Patricia looked up and forced a tight smile. "We made good time, thank God. Now put that away, we need to find the porter for the bags." Then from the front seat I heard my father's voice. "Kyle, make sure you grab the duty-free bag. I need a drink." And then the voice of my brother-in-law, Kyle. "Don't worry, Des. I am way ahead of you." The video ended. I lowered the phone to my chest. They were at the port. They were actually boarding. I dialed my mother's number. I don't know why. Maybe I was a masochist. Maybe I needed to hear her say it one more time to make sure I wasn't hallucinating from the morphine. It rang 3 times before she picked up. The background noise was loud wind seagulls and the distant sound of steel drums. "Hello, Jasmine." Her voice was clipped impatient. "Mom," I said, "I am out of surgery." "Oh, thank God," she said, but her tone didn't sound thankful. It sounded relieved that she didn't have to deal with a funeral arrangement that might interrupt the buffet schedule. We were getting worried. We almost missed our boarding group because I was checking my phone. "You are at the ship," I said flatly. "Yes, we just got on board. The reception is terrible, so make it quick." "Mom, I am lying in a hospital bed with a metal rod in my leg. Leo is with a stranger. I need you to get off the boat. The ship hasn't left the dock yet. You can still walk off. Please, I am begging you. I can't do this alone." There was a heavy sigh on the other end of the line. A sigh that said I was being unreasonable. A sigh that I had heard 1,000 times in my childhood whenever I asked for something that wasn't convenient for her. "Jasmine, be reasonable," she said. "The tickets are non-refundable. We have been planning this for 6 months. Do you know how much money we would lose? And besides, Bianca needs this. She has been so fragile lately." I laughed a dry, humorless sound. "Bianca is fragile. I was just pulled out of a crushed vehicle, Mom." I heard Bianca's voice in the background loud and clear. "Mom, come on. Kyle is waiting to pop the champagne on the Lido deck. The view is amazing." "Did you hear that?" I asked, tears stinging my eyes. "She is drinking champagne while I am drinking liquid painkiller." "Jasmine, listen to me," my mother said, her voice dropping to that patronizing tone she used when she wanted to manipulate me. "You are different. You have always been the strong one. You are a survivor. You handle things. Bianca, she isn't like you. She needs us. She needs support to function. You don't. You thrive on pressure." I realized then that my strength was my curse. Because I never complained, because I paid the bills, because I fixed the problems, they assumed I didn't need love. They punished me for my competence and rewarded Bianca for her incompetence. "So that is it?" I asked quietly. "You are choosing the cruise." "We are choosing to not let a bad situation ruin everyone's week," she corrected me. "Look, hire the best help money can buy. Send me the bill if you have to, though I know you have plenty. We will check in when we get to Nassau. I love you, Jas. Now I really have to go. We are losing signal." The line went dead. I stared at the ceiling for a long time. The silence in the room was heavy, but it wasn't empty anymore. It was filled with clarity. For 35 years I had been buying my family's affection. I paid off their mortgage. I paid for Bianca's 3 failed attempts at college. I paid for Kyle's car note when he couldn't hold down a job. I sent them $5,000 a month like clockwork, thinking it was my duty as the successful daughter. I thought that if I gave enough, if I was good enough, they would finally see me. But they didn't see me. They saw an ATM. They saw a safety net that would always be there no matter how much they abused it. I wiped the tears from my face with the back of my hand. The sadness was evaporating, replaced by a cold, sharp anger. It started in my chest and spread to my fingertips. "Nurse," I called out. Brenda stepped back into the room instantly. "Yes, honey. Do you need more pain meds?" "No," I said. "I need my work laptop. It was in the car. Did they recover it?" "Yes, the police brought it in with your bag. It is a bit scratched, but it looks intact. Get it for me. And get me the contact information for the VIP nursing agency you mentioned." Brenda hesitated. "Jasmine, you just had surgery. You need to sleep." "I will sleep when I am dead," I said, pushing the button to raise the head of my bed. "Right now, I have business to handle." She brought me the laptop. I opened it, wincing as the movement pulled at my stitches. I logged into my banking portal. The screen illuminated my face, casting a blue glow over the hospital sheets. First, I transferred $50,000 to the hospital's private care division. I hired the pediatric team for a full month, 24-hour monitoring for Leo, night nurses, day nurses, developmental specialists. If my parents wouldn't care for him, I would pay professionals who would do it better. It cost a fortune, an obscene amount of money, but I didn't care. Leo would be treated like a prince. Then I opened my email. I started a new draft. Subject line: representation. I wasn't emailing my usual estate lawyer. He was too nice. He was a family friend. I needed someone else. I typed in the address of Marcus Sterling. He was a ruthless litigator from a rival firm, a man known in Atlanta legal circles as the Shark. He didn't have friends. He had clients and victims. "Dear Mr. Sterling, I require your immediate services regarding a complex family trust and property dispute. I am prepared to put you on a $20,000 retainer effective immediately. My instructions are simple. I want to recover every single penny I have legally loaned to my parents over the last decade, and I want to evict the current occupants of the property at 4500 Peachtree Lane." I hit send. Then I went back to the banking tab. I looked at the line item labeled Automatic Transfer, Mom and Dad. Status pending. Scheduled for the first of the month, which was tomorrow. $5,000. I moved my cursor over the cancel button. My mother's voice echoed in my head. "You are always the strong one." My finger hovered over the mouse. "I am strong, Mom," I whispered to the empty room. "Strong enough to cut you off." I clicked. Cancelled. I didn't stop there. I went to the credit card tab. My Amex Platinum. The one Bianca had stolen from my purse while I was unconscious. I could see the pending charges already. $200 at the airport Starbucks. $80 for an Uber XL. I clicked Report Lost/Stolen. Reason, the prompt asked. I typed theft by family member. I hit submit. The card was instantly deactivated. I leaned back against the pillows, exhaustion finally claiming me. I imagined them at the bar on the ship ordering that next round of champagne. I imagined the waiter coming back with the card reader. I imagined the decline message. "Enjoy the view, Bianca," I murmured, closing my eyes. "Because it is the last thing I am ever buying you." I do not think I truly understood the definition of audacity until 2 hours after my surgery. I was drifting in and out of a morphine haze, the edges of my vision blurry and soft. The room was quiet, a sanctuary of healing, until the door didn't just open, but flew back against the wall with a hollow thud that rattled the medical instruments on the tray. The silence shattered instantly. It wasn't the concern of loving parents rushing to their injured child. It was the chaotic, self-absorbed noise of a traveling circus. The scent hit me before they did. It was an overpowering mix of expensive coconut tanning oil, my mother's heavy floral perfume, and the stale sweetness of airport mimosas. My eyes struggled to focus. Standing in the doorway of my sterile white recovery room was a kaleidoscope of bright colors. My father Desmond was wearing a linen suit that cost more than my first car, topped with a Panama hat. My mother was draped in a flowing caftan that swept the hospital floor. Bianca was in a neon pink sundress that was far too short for a hospital visit, and Kyle, my brother-in-law, looked like a caricature of a tourist in a loud Hawaiian shirt and aviator sunglasses that he didn't bother to remove indoors. Behind them, blocking the hallway and annoying the nursing staff, was a mountain of luggage. I recognized the monogrammed pattern immediately. The Louis Vuitton set I had bought them for their 30th anniversary. The Gucci duffel bag I had given Kyle for Christmas because he complained his gym bag was embarrassing. They had dragged their vacation right into my trauma unit. "Jasmine, wake up." My father's voice boomed, devoid of any softness. "Do you have any idea what the traffic is like on the connector? We have been circling the parking deck for 20 minutes. I tried to push myself up, but my arms felt like they were filled with lead. A low groan escaped my lips. "Dad," I whispered. "My leg." He didn't look at my leg. He didn't look at the metal external fixator pins sticking out of my thigh or the drain tube running from my side. He looked at his Rolex. "We only have 10 minutes, Jasmine," he snapped, wiping sweat from his forehead. "The ship leaves at 4. If we miss the all-aboard time, the insurance does not cover it. We just stopped by to make sure you were handled." Handled. Like I was a piece of luggage or a business transaction. "Where is Leo?" I managed to ask, my tongue feeling thick and clumsy. "Oh, the nurse said he is sleeping." My mother waved her hand dismissively, not even stepping fully into the room. She was busy checking her reflection in the glass of a framed hospital policy poster. We didn't want to wake him. Babies are so fussy when you wake them up, and honestly, I don't have the energy for crying right now. My migraine is already flaring up. I looked at them, really looked at them, and for the first time, I didn't see my family. I saw strangers. Strangers who were annoyed that my near-death experience was an inconvenience to their leisure. Kyle stepped forward, then chewing loudly on a piece of gum. He strolled around the room with the air of a man inspecting a hotel suite he hadn't paid for. He ran his hand along the leather recliner in the corner, tapped the large flat-screen TV mounted on the wall, and whistled low. "Damn, Jazz," he chuckled, shaking his head. "You really know how to live, don't you? Even when you are dying, you do it in style. This room is bigger than our master bedroom." He walked over to the side of my bed. I flinched, expecting him to touch my arm, but he just leaned on the railing, looking down at me with a smirk that made my skin crawl. "Must be nice having that platinum insurance," he said, his voice dripping with envy. "Private nurses, VIP suite." Meanwhile, we are about to squeeze into a stateroom that is probably half this size. He looked at the morphine pump connected to my IV. "That the good stuff?" he asked, pointing to the clear liquid. "Lucky girl. You get to float on a cloud for a week while we have to deal with the crowds and the heat. Tell you what, I will drink a Bahama Mama for you tonight, maybe 2. I will toast to your recovery." He didn't mean it. There was no warmth in his eyes, only a cold calculation. He was jealous. He was jealous that I was the center of attention, even if that attention came from a team of trauma surgeons. I wanted to scream at him. I wanted to tell him to get out, to take his cheap shirt and his freeloading attitude and leave. But the drugs were pulling me down, making my limbs heavy and my voice weak. "Get out," I mouthed, but no sound came out. Then I saw Bianca. My sister had been standing near the door, tapping furiously on her phone, probably updating her followers on her tragic delay. But when she saw me looking at her, she didn't come to my side. She didn't take my hand. She walked straight to the closet where the nurse had hung my torn, bloodied clothes and my purse. She opened the closet door and reached for my Hermes Birkin bag. "What are you doing?" I croaked, finding a shred of volume. Bianca didn't even look guilty. She rummaged through the bag with the efficiency of someone who had done this 1,000 times before. She pulled out my wallet. "Relax, Jazz," she said, flipping the wallet open. "I just need to borrow the Amex." She pulled out the heavy black titanium card. The card I worked 80-hour weeks to qualify for. The card that had a limit high enough to buy a small house. Kyle's card has a limit, she explained, as if that was a perfectly reasonable justification for theft. And Mom's card got declined at the gas station last week. I saw this gorgeous dress online that I need for the captain's dinner on Thursday. It is vintage. They only have one left. She held the card up to the light, checking the name, then slipped it into the pocket of her sundress. You are not using it here. Obviously. She laughed, a bright tinkling sound that grated on my nerves. You will be in a hospital gown for weeks, you won't even miss it. I will bring it back when we dock next Sunday. Bianca. I tried to sit up, but the pain in my leg exploded, a white-hot bolt of lightning that made me gasp and fall back against the pillows. That is theft. Oh, stop being so dramatic, my father interjected, checking his watch again. It is not theft. She is your sister. Family shares. You have always been so stingy, Jasmine, always counting pennies while we are just trying to enjoy life. Let her have the dress. You can write it off as a business expense or whatever it is you lawyers do. We really have to go, Desmond, my mother said, finally turning away from her reflection. The driver just texted. He is getting impatient. She looked at me then. A fleeting, obligatory glance. Rest up, Jasmine. We will pray for you. Don't worry about Leo. The nurses here are paid to care, right? He is in good hands. Better than dragging him onto a boat with all those germs. She blew me a kiss from the doorway. An air kiss. She didn't want to ruin her lipstick. Come on, babe, let's go, Kyle said, grabbing the handle of the Gucci duffel. He winked at me. Try not to have too much fun without us. And just like that, they were moving. The whirlwind of color and noise swept back out into the hallway. Bianca didn't look back. She was already on her phone again, probably browsing for shoes to match the dress she was about to buy with my money. Wait, I whispered, tears of frustration leaking from my eyes. Come back. But the door swung shut, dampening the sound of their retreating laughter. I was alone again. The silence returned, but it felt different now. It felt heavy. It felt final. I lay there staring at the closed door, the image of Bianca slipping my credit card into her pocket burned into my retinas. They had walked in, stepped over my broken body, insulted my pain, stolen my property, and left. They didn't care if I lived or died as long as I financed the trip. The pain in my leg was throbbing, a deep rhythmic agony that synced with my heartbeat. But beneath the physical pain, something else was breaking. The illusion of family. The desperate, childlike hope that if I just gave enough, if I just achieved enough, they would love me. It broke. It shattered into a million sharp pieces, just like the windshield of my car. And in its place, a cold, hard resolve began to form. They thought I was helpless. They thought I was just the bank, the doormat, the safety net. They thought they could walk out of here with my card and my money and have the time of their lives while I lay here bleeding. I closed my eyes and focused on my breathing. In, out, in, out. I waited 5 minutes. I needed to be sure they were in the elevator. I needed to be sure they were in the car, laughing about how easy it was, how Jasmine always caved, how Jasmine always paid. Then I reached for the call button on the side of the bed. I pressed it not with desperation, but with purpose. Nurse Brenda appeared in the doorway a moment later. Did they leave, honey? She asked gently. I saw a group leaving with a lot of bags. Yes, I said, my voice surprisingly steady. They left. I need you to hand me my laptop again, Brenda. And my phone. She looked at me, concern etched on her face. You need to rest, Jasmine. Your vitals are elevated. I know, I said, opening my eyes. I will rest soon. But first, I have to make a robbery report. And then I have to cancel a vacation. Brenda hesitated, then walked over to the closet. She brought the laptop and the phone. Thank you, I said. As the screen came to life, illuminating my face in the dim room, I didn't feel like a victim anymore. I felt like a prosecutor preparing for the biggest case of her life. They wanted a vacation. I was about to give them a trip they would never forget. I navigated to the American Express app. I could already see a pending charge. $400. Uber black SUV. They had taken a luxury ride to the port on my dime. Not for long. I tapped the report stolen button. The game was over. The war had just begun. The silence in my hospital room was heavy, but for the first time in my life, it did not feel lonely. It felt like the calm before a storm. I watched the clock on the wall tick past 3 in the afternoon. My leg was throbbing with a dull rhythmic ache that the pain medication could only dampen, not erase, but my mind was razor sharp. Nurse Brenda stepped back into the room, her rubber-soled shoes squeaking softly on the linoleum. She checked the monitors and then looked at me with a softness I was not used to receiving. "They are gone," she confirmed quietly, answering the question I had not even asked aloud. Security watched them load the luggage into the Uber. "Your son is in the nursery with the private agency nurse you hired. Her name is Sarah and she comes highly recommended. She has been sending me updates every 15 minutes. He is eating well and sleeping." I nodded, feeling a lump form in my throat. My 7-week-old baby was being cared for by a stranger named Sarah because his grandmother was too busy chasing a buffet. That realization should have broken me. Instead, it calcified my heart. It turned my sadness into a weapon. "Thank you, Brenda," I said. "I need to make a phone call. A private one." She nodded and slipped out, closing the door until it clicked. I picked up my phone. My thumb hovered over the contact for my personal banker at Chase Private Client. His name was David and we had spoken so many times over the years that he knew my voice instantly. Usually I called him to authorize large transfers for my parents. I called to pay off Kyle's gambling debts disguised as business loans. I called to cover Bianca's credit card bills so her credit score would not tank. Today the conversation would be very different. "David," I said when he answered on the first ring. "It is Jasmine Reynolds, Miss Reynolds." "Good afternoon," he chirped, his professional cheerfulness jarring against the sterile hospital atmosphere. "How can I help you today? Another transfer to the family trust?" "No, David. I need you to listen to me very carefully. I am invoking the fraud protection protocol on my primary American Express Platinum card." There was a pause. The professional cheer dropped a notch. "Oh, I see. Do you have the card in your possession?" "No," I said, my voice steady and cold. "It was taken from my purse without my authorization about 2 hours ago. I believe the individual is currently attempting to use it at the port of Miami." "Understood. I can put a temporary freeze on it if you think you might recover it." "No freeze, David. Mark it as stolen. Cancel it completely. If anyone attempts to swipe it, I want the merchant to receive a decline code that requires confiscation of the card." I could hear his fingers typing furiously on a keyboard. "Done. The card is dead." "Is there anything else?" "Yes. One more thing. You manage the standing order for $5,000 that goes to Desmond and Patricia Reynolds on the 1st of every month." "Yes, ma'am. That is scheduled to go out tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. "Cancel it," I said. Silence stretched over the line. David knew my finances better than anyone. He knew that money was the lifeline that kept my parents' lifestyle afloat. "Cancel the transfer." "David, entirely." "Permanently," I corrected him. "Delete the beneficiary instructions. And David, while you are in the system, check the authorization for the secondary debit cards I issued to my parents. I see them here. Limit is $2,000 a month. Revoke them. Set the limit to 0. Effective immediately." There was a longer pause this time. "Ms. Reynolds, this will effectively cut off all access your family has to your accounts." "Are you sure?" I looked down at my broken leg encased in bandages and metal. I thought about Leo lying in a plastic crib down the hall, waiting for a mother who couldn't hold him. "I have never been more sure of anything in my life, David." "Burn it all down." "Very well. It is done." I hung up the phone and leaned back against the pillows. I closed my eyes and let my imagination travel 500 miles south to the humid, bustling chaos of the port of Miami. I knew exactly what was happening there, I knew the layout of the VIP check-in lounge, I knew the smell of the ocean mixed with expensive perfume, and I knew with absolute certainty that the show was about to begin. At that exact moment in the VIP terminal of the Royal Seas Cruise Line, the air conditioning was blasting, but it wasn't enough to cool down the excitement radiating from my sister Bianca. She stood in the priority line, tapping her foot impatiently in her designer sandals. She was wearing the wide-brimmed hat she had shown off in her video, and she looked every inch the wealthy heiress she pretended to be. Kyle stood next to her, wiping sweat from his forehead with the back of his hand. He was already complaining about the wait, even though the VIP line had only 3 people in it. "This is ridiculous," he muttered, adjusting his sunglasses. "Do they know who we are? We shouldn't be waiting behind these people." "Relax, baby," Bianca said, flipping her hair. "We are next. Once we get on board, it is all free drinks and lobster." Jasmine really came through with this trip. My parents, Desmond and Patricia, were standing a few feet behind them, looking regal and detached. My mother was critiquing the outfit of a woman in the regular line, whispering to my father about how tacky polyester looked in this humidity. They were completely unbothered by the fact that they had left their daughter in a trauma unit 3 hours ago. In their minds, they deserved this. They had raised me, hadn't they? They were entitled to the fruits of my labor. "Next guest, please," the agent at the counter called out with a bright smile. Bianca shimmied up to the desk, slamming her passport and the booking confirmation down with a flourish. "Hi. We are in the Diamond Suite, Reynolds' party." The agent, a young woman with tired eyes but a polite demeanor, began typing. "Welcome, Ms. Reynolds. I see the reservation here. 4 guests, 2 suites. Everything looks to be in order. I just need a credit card on file for onboard incidentals." Bianca reached into her pocket. She didn't pull out her own card, which she knew was maxed out. She pulled out my heavy black American Express Platinum card. She held it between 2 fingers like it was a magic wand that granted wishes. "Here you go," she said, flashing a dazzling smile. "Put it on this." The agent took the card. She swiped it through the reader attached to her keyboard. We waited. Or rather, they waited. A harsh, dissonant buzz sounded from the machine. The agent frowned. "I am sorry, ma'am. It didn't go through. Let me try again." Bianca rolled her eyes, glancing back at the line of people forming behind them. "Ugh, technology. Just chip it." The agent inserted the chip. "Processing. Processing." The buzz sounded again, louder this time. The agent looked at the screen, her eyebrows knitting together in confusion. "Ma'am, the system says the card has been reported stolen." The air in the VIP lounge seemed to freeze. Bianca's smile faltered, then hardened into a scowl. "Excuse me," she laughed nervously. "That is impossible. That is my sister's card. She gave it to me this morning. Try it again. Your machine is probably broken." "I cannot try it again, ma'am," the agent said, her voice losing some of its warmth. "The code is explicit." "Pick up card. I have to confiscate this." "Confiscate it." Kyle stepped forward. His chest puffed out in that aggressive way he used whenever he felt threatened. "You are not taking anything. Give me that card back. Do you know how much money is in that account? You are making a mistake." "Sir, please lower your voice," the agent said, her hand moving instinctively toward the radio on her belt. "Don't tell me to lower my voice," Kyle shouted, slamming his hand on the counter. The people in line behind them gasped. Security guards near the entrance turned their heads. "Just run the damn card manually. It is declined, sir." The agent snapped back, her patience evaporating. "Do you have another form of payment? If not, I cannot issue your boarding passes." Bianca turned to my parents. Her face flushed a deep, humiliating shade of red. "Mom, Dad, do something. This stupid machine is eating Jasmine's card." My mother sighed, stepping forward with the air of a martyr. "Honestly, this is so embarrassing. Jasmine probably forgot to unlock it for travel. She is so scatterbrained sometimes. Desmond, just give them our debit card. We will settle it with Jasmine later." My father reached into his wallet. He pulled out the navy blue Chase debit card. The one attached to the account I funded. The one that was supposed to receive $5,000 tomorrow morning. Here, he said, sliding it across the counter with a sneer. Use this, and I expect an upgrade for this inconvenience. The agent took the card. She swiped it. My father tapped his fingers on the countertop, looking around at the other passengers with a look that said, "Can you believe this incompetence?" The machine beeped. A long, low tone. The agent looked at the screen. She looked at my father. She looked at the line of wealthy travelers watching the scene unfold. "I am sorry, sir," she said, her voice loud enough for the first 3 rows to hear. "This card has also been declined. The error message is insufficient funds." The silence that followed was absolute. Insufficient funds, my father sputtered, his face going from arrogant to ashen in a split second. "That is impossible. There is always money in there. Try it again." "I have tried it, sir. The balance is 0. 0, my mother shrieked, her composure cracking. "That can't be." "It is the 1st of the month. The transfer always comes through." "Well, it didn't come through today, ma'am," the agent said, handing the useless piece of plastic back to him. "Now, unless you have another way to pay the $12,000 balance for these suites, plus the incidental hold, I am going to have to ask you to step out of the line. You are holding up the other diamond guests." Whispers erupted behind them. I could imagine the comments. "Look at them acting so rich and can't even pay. How embarrassing. They must be frauds." For a family that prized reputation above everything else, this was death by 1,000 cuts. Kyle was frantic now, patting his pockets. He pulled out 3 other credit cards. He threw them on the counter. "Try these." Declined. "Maxed out." Declined. "Account closed." Declined. The agent looked at Kyle with pity. "Sir, none of these are working." Bianca burst into tears. Not the cute, manipulative tears she used to get her way, but ugly, panicked tears. "My vacation. We are supposed to be on the boat. We have reservations at Chop's Grill tonight." "Security," the agent said into her radio. "I have a party refusing to vacate the check-in counter." 2 large officers in uniform began walking toward them. The crowd parted like the Red Sea, but not out of respect. They moved to avoid the contagion of failure. My mother grabbed my father's arm. "Desmond, fix this call. Jasmine, call her right now." My father was already dialing. His hands were shaking so hard he dropped the phone once before managing to hit my contact. Back in the hospital room, my phone buzzed on the tray table. Dad calling. I watched it vibrate. I watched the name dance across the screen. I didn't reach for it. I didn't feel a flicker of guilt. I picked up a grape from the lunch tray the nurse had left and popped it into my mouth. It was sweet. The phone stopped ringing. Then it started again immediately. Mom calling. I let that one ring out too. Then Kyle. Then Bianca. They were blowing up my phone, desperate, stranded, and humiliated, in front of the very social circle they tried so hard to impress. They were standing in a terminal with thousands of dollars of luggage and $0 in their pockets. I finally picked up the phone, but not to answer. I switched it to Do Not Disturb. Then I opened the app for the security cameras at my house. I wanted to check the perimeter, because I knew as surely as I knew the sun would set that once they were kicked out of that terminal, they would not be going to a hotel. They couldn't afford one. They would be coming for me, and I would be ready. The phone on my hospital tray table buzzed again, dancing across the plastic surface like an angry hornet. It was Kyle. The screen lit up with his name for the 5th time in 2 minutes. I watched it vibrate, feeling a strange sense of detachment. My leg was throbbing, a deep, bone-grinding ache that reminded me I was still broken, but my mind was operating with a clarity I had not felt in years. I picked up the phone. I did not slide the answer button immediately. I let it ring one more time, savoring the knowledge that on the other end of the line, he was sweating. He was panicking. He was realizing that the golden faucet he had been drinking from for 5 years had finally been turned off. I slid my thumb across the screen and brought the phone to my ear. I did not say hello. I just listened. Jasmine, are you insane? Kyle screamed, his voice cracking with a mixture of rage and fear. The background noise was chaotic. I could hear the murmur of the crowd, the beep of scanners, and the stern voice of a security guard telling someone to step back. You need to fix this right now. Do you hear me? They are treating us like criminals. They have security standing right next to us, like we are trying to rob the place. I stared at the ceiling tile directly above my bed. It had a water stain shaped like a cloud. I spoke calmly, my voice dropping an octave, stripping away all emotion. You did try to rob the place, Kyle. Or rather, you tried to rob me. Using a credit card that does not belong to you without the owner's permission is the legal definition of theft. Don't give me that lawyer crap, he shouted, and I could hear the desperation leaking through his bravado. Bianca is your sister. She borrowed it. We are family. You can't just report it stolen while we are standing at the counter. The agent took the card, Jasmine. She literally took it. She said she has to cut it up. Good, I said. That saves me the trouble of destroying it myself later. There was a pause, and then I heard my mother's voice in the background, shrill and frantic. Give me the phone, Kyle. Let me talk to her. There was a fumbling sound, and then my mother was breathless in my ear. Jasmine, stop this nonsense immediately. Everyone is staring at us. The Johnsons from church are in the line behind us. Do you want them to see us being escorted out? Do you want to ruin our reputation over a petty disagreement? Unlock the card. Or better yet, call the bank and authorize a transfer to your father's debit card. We can fix this if you act fast. I closed my eyes. Even now, standing in the wreckage of their own greed, her biggest concern was not her injured daughter or her abandoned grandson. It was the Johnsons from church. It was the appearance of wealth, the facade of the perfect, blessed family. Mom, I said, feeling the final tether snap. There is nothing to fix. The money isn't lost. It isn't missing. I just spent it. What do you mean you spent it? She snapped. You are in a hospital bed. Exactly, I said. I am in a hospital bed. My husband is in Japan. You and Dad and Bianca refused to help me. You told me to figure it out. You told me to hire help. So I did. I took a deep breath, letting the words form clearly. I hired the entire pediatric VIP nursing team for Leo. I hired a 24-hour private security detail for my room. I hired a concierge service to manage my house while I am here. That $50,000 usually sitting in my liquid cash account. It is gone, Mom. It is allocated to the people who are actually taking care of me. There was silence on the line. A heavy, stunned silence. You spent $50,000 on nurses, she whispered, as if I had confessed to burning the money in a bonfire. Yes, I said. You told me Bianca needed a vacation. You said her mental health was a priority. Well, Leo's safety is my priority. You made your choice when you stepped over my stretcher to get to the limo. I made mine when I woke up alone. But the cruise, she stammered. It is $10,000. It is non-refundable. If we don't board in the next 20 minutes, we lose everything. I know, I said. It is a shame. Maybe you can watch the ship sail away from the parking lot. I hear the view is nice from there. You ungrateful little... Kyle's voice came back on the line, snatching the phone from her. I am going to sue you. You hear me. I will sue you for emotional distress. I will tell everyone what you did. Go ahead, Kyle, I said, a cold smile touching my lips. Tell them. Tell them you left your sister-in-law bleeding in a trauma center so you could drink rum punch. Tell them you stole her credit card. Tell them you have been living off her charity for 5 years. I will be happy to provide the receipts to anyone who asks, including your probation officer. That shut him up. We both knew about the little legal trouble he had back in college, a record expunged only because my money paid for the lawyer. Goodbye, Kyle, I said. Enjoy the drive home. I changed the locks on the house remotely 10 minutes ago, by the way. You might want to find a hotel. Oh wait, you don't have any money for that, do you? I hung up. I dropped the phone back onto the tray table. My heart was pounding not from fear, but from the adrenaline of finally standing up. I lay there and let my imagination fill in the blanks of what was happening 500 miles away. I could see it so clearly. The Royal Seas Terminal gleaming with glass and steel. The long line of happy vacationers in their floral shirts and sun hats holding their cocktails, excited for a week of paradise. And then my family. I imagined the security guard, a large man with a no-nonsense expression, stepping forward and gesturing toward the exit. I imagined the hushed whispers of the people around them. The Johnsons from church, peering over their sunglasses, shaking their heads, pulling out their phones to text the prayer circle group chat about the Reynolds family's fall from grace. I imagined the physical struggle of it. They had packed for a week of luxury. 4 massive suitcases, 2 garment bags, a carry-on for each of them, without a porter to help them. Because porters only help ticketed passengers, they would have to drag all of that luggage back through the terminal themselves. I pictured Bianca struggling with her oversized vintage trunk, her high heels clicking angrily on the polished floor, tears streaming down her face, ruining her perfect makeup. I pictured my father sweating through his linen suit, his Panama hat askew, trying to maintain an air of dignity while hauling a heavy bag that kept tipping over. I pictured my mother looking straight ahead, refusing to make eye contact with anyone, her face a mask of fury and humiliation. And Kyle, I pictured him red-faced and impotent, shouting at the sliding glass doors as they didn't open fast enough, looking for someone to blame, looking for a manager to yell at, but finding no one who cared. They would have to stand on the curb in the humidity and the exhaust fumes of the buses, waiting for a taxi they couldn't afford or an Uber they couldn't book. They would have to call a friend. They would have to beg. For the first time in 10 years, they were feeling the weight of their own choices. I picked up my phone again, but this time, I didn't open the phone app. I opened my banking app. I needed to see it. I needed to see the numbers. I logged in with my Face ID. The dashboard loaded. I scrolled down to the checking account. The balance was higher than I expected. And then I realized why. The pending transfer. The $5,000 that was scheduled to leave my account tomorrow morning, it was gone. The line item was struck through, replaced by a gray text that read, "Cancelled by user." I stared at that number. $5,000. It wasn't just $5,000. It was peace of mind. It was freedom. I pulled up the calculator app. My thumb hovered over the keypad. $5,000 a month. 12 months a year. 10 years. $600,000. That was the base number. That was just the allowance I gave them to keep the peace, to keep them from complaining, to buy their love. But then I started adding the extras. The down payment on the house in Buckhead. $200,000. The cars. I had bought my dad a Mercedes for his 60th birthday because he said a man of his stature shouldn't drive a Ford. $60,000. Bianca's student loans for the fashion design degree she never finished. $40,000. Kyle's business investments that always vanished into thin air. $30,000 here, $20,000 there. I did the math. The number on the screen made me nauseous. Over $1 million. In the last decade, I had poured over $1 million into the black hole that was my family. And what did I have to show for it? I looked down at my broken leg. I looked around the empty hospital room. I had nothing. I had a mother who wouldn't hold my hand before surgery. I had a father who checked his watch while I was in pain. I had a sister who stole from me while I was unconscious. I had spent $1 million buying a family, and I was still an orphan. The realization hit me with the force of a physical blow. I hadn't been supporting them. I had been enabling them. I had been feeding a parasite that had grown so large it was finally trying to consume the host. They didn't love me. They loved the lifestyle I provided. They loved the access. They loved the status of having a successful daughter, a lawyer daughter, a rich daughter. But they didn't love Jasmine. If I had been a teacher or a social worker or a cashier, would they have even answered my calls? I knew the answer. And that answer hardened the last soft place in my heart. I looked at the notifications on my screen. My stock portfolio was up. My savings account was earning interest. For the first time, all of that growth was mine. It wasn't earmarked for a family emergency. It wasn't waiting to rescue Bianca from her next mistake. It was for me, and it was for Leo. I opened the photo gallery on my phone. I scrolled past the photos of family dinners where I paid the bill but wasn't included in the conversation. I scrolled past the photos of vacations where I stayed in the smallest room while they took the suites. I found the photo of Leo. It was taken 3 days ago. He was sleeping on my chest, his tiny hand gripping my finger. I zoomed in on his face. "You are never going to feel this," I whispered to the image on the screen. "You are never going to feel like you have to buy your way into this family. You are never going to wonder if you are worth more than a check." I was done being the bank. I was done being the safety net. I heard footsteps in the hall. Nurse Brenda peeked her head in. "Everything okay in here, Jasmine?" she asked softly. "I heard you raising your voice earlier." I looked at her and smiled. A genuine smile. It reached my eyes for the first time since the crash. "I am better than okay, Brenda," I said. "I just lost about 600 pounds of dead weight." She looked confused, glancing at my leg in the cast. "I just took out the trash," I clarified. "And now I think I am ready to sleep." As I closed my eyes, I didn't dream of the crash. I didn't dream of the pain. I dreamed of my bank account growing protected and safe. And in the distance, I saw a cruise ship sailing away, empty of the people who had hurt me, disappearing over the horizon, leaving me in peace. The silence in the room was no longer heavy. It was golden. It was the sound of freedom, and it was worth every single penny I had just saved. 3 days after the surgery, I was finally released from the hospital. The transition home was not the triumphant return of a survivor, but a logistical military operation. I sat in a rented medical wheelchair while an ambulance crew lifted me up the front steps of my own house. The house I bought. The house that had always been open to everyone in my family was now a fortress with changed locks and a security detail parked in the driveway. Inside, the silence was different. It wasn't empty. It was peaceful. The pediatric nurse Sarah had set up a nursery station in the guest room on the main floor, so I wouldn't have to navigate the stairs. For the first time since the accident, I held Leo without wires or tubes getting in the way. He smelled like baby powder and innocence. I pressed my face into his soft neck and breathed him in, trying to let his warmth melt the icy knot of anxiety that had settled in my stomach. But the peace was an illusion. While my house was quiet, my phone was screaming. It started with a single vibration on the coffee table, then another, then a continuous angry buzzing that rattled the ceramic coaster. I ignored it at first, focused on the rhythmic rise and fall of Leo's chest. But then the landline rang. When I let that go to voicemail, the iPad in the kitchen lit up. They were coming for me. Not with fists or guns, but with something far more damaging in the tight-knit Atlanta community we belong to. They were coming with words. I handed Leo back to Sarah, who took him with a gentle, knowing smile. I wheeled myself over to the coffee table and picked up my phone. I didn't have to look hard to find the source of the noise. My notifications were flooded: Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. I opened Facebook first. The algorithm, cruel and efficient, put the post right at the top of my feed. It was Bianca. She had posted a photo taken at the cruise terminal 3 days ago. It was a masterpiece of manipulation. My mother was sitting on a suitcase looking down at her hands with a performative expression of devastation. My father was standing with his back to the camera, looking out at the cruise ship that was presumably leaving without them, his shoulders slumped in defeat. And Bianca. She was in the foreground, tears streaming down her face, holding her stomach protectively. The caption was an essay, a manifesto of victimhood. "My heart is shattered," she wrote. "We spent months planning a family healing trip for my parents, who have sacrificed so much for us. We were at the gate, we were ready to board, and then without warning we were left stranded. My sister Jasmine Reynolds, who has been blessed with so much wealth, decided in a fit of jealousy to cut off all funding and cancel our tickets while we were standing in line. She left our elderly parents sitting on the curb in the heat for hours with no ride home. I read the words, my jaw tightening. It was a lie, but it was a believable lie to anyone who didn't know the truth. But then I read the next paragraph, and the bile rose in my throat. I can handle the cruelty toward me, Bianca continued. But to do this to our parents is unforgivable. And to do this to me knowing my condition is evil. Stress is dangerous for the baby. Yes, I am announcing it here because I have no other choice. I am pregnant. And my sister left her unborn niece or nephew on the side of the road because she couldn't stand not being the center of attention. Please pray for our family. Pray for Jasmine's hardened heart. I stared at the screen. Pregnant. Bianca wasn't pregnant. I knew for a fact she had just refilled her birth control prescription last week, because the pharmacy notification came to my email, which was still linked to her account. I also knew she had been drinking mimosas at the airport because she posted a boomerang of it on her story right before the crash. She was using a fake pregnancy to turn me into a monster. And she had tagged everyone. She tagged the senior pastor of Ebenezer Baptist, where our family had attended for 3 generations. She tagged the head of the usher board. She tagged the president of the local homeowners association. She tagged my cousins, my high school friends, and even a few of my business associates. The comment section was a war zone, and I was the target. I scrolled through the hundreds of replies feeling like I was being stoned in the town square. Sister Patterson, a deaconess who had known me since I was 5, wrote, Jasmine, I am praying for your soul. Money is the root of all evil, and it has clearly rotted your spirit. How could you do this to your mother and father? My cousin Dante commented, this is what happens when people forget where they come from. You think because you have a fancy degree and a big house you are better than us. Shame on you. Aunt Verna, the matriarch of the family gossip chain, had left a paragraph-long sermon. This is a disgrace to the family name. We do not treat our elders this way. You are making us look bad in front of everyone. You need to humble yourself and ask God for forgiveness. Fix this, Jasmine. Or do not bother showing your face at the reunion. They didn't ask for my side of the story. They didn't ask why I was in the hospital. They didn't ask about Leo. They saw a crying pregnant woman and an elderly couple, and they saw a rich, arrogant lawyer who had forgotten her place. The racial undertones were subtle but sharp. The accusations of acting white, of being bougie, of abandoning the village that raised me. They were weaponizing my success against me. They were using the community's trauma, the fear of being left behind, of losing cohesion, to paint me as a traitor. But the worst comment, the one that made my blood turn to ice, was from Kyle. He hadn't just liked the post. He had commented, and his comment had over 200 likes. It is sad, really, Kyle wrote. I have tried to be the peacemaker. I have tried to support Jasmine even when she is difficult. But she has this aggressive energy that is impossible to deal with. She is so bitter and angry all the time. She can't stand seeing anyone else happy. I just hope she gets the help she needs before she ends up alone. We are just worried about her mental state. Aggressive, bitter, angry. He was using every single dog whistle in the book. He was painting me as the angry black woman. He, a white man living off my money, was using racial stereotypes to discredit my valid reaction to their abuse. He was telling the world that I was unstable, that I was the aggressor, and that he was the patient suffering victim. My finger hovered over the reply button. I wanted to type. I wanted to scream. I wanted to tell Sister Patterson that the money she thought was the root of all evil had paid for her hip surgery last year when the church fund ran dry. I wanted to tell Cousin Dante that I paid his bail when he got picked up for that DUI. I wanted to tell the world that Bianca was not pregnant, she was just a liar with a maxed-out credit card. I typed out a response. I typed out the truth about the crash. I typed out that I was in a wheelchair because of a semi-truck, not jealousy. But then I stopped. I looked at the phone in my lap. I looked at the chaos in the comments section. They wanted a reaction. They wanted me to get down in the mud with them. If I responded now, I would look defensive. I would look exactly like the angry, bitter woman Kyle was describing. They were fighting a PR war. They were fighting for public opinion because that was the only currency they had left. I had actual currency. And I had the law. I deleted the draft. Instead, I took a screenshot. I screenshotted Bianca's post. I screenshotted the pregnancy claim. I screenshotted Kyle's comments. I screenshotted every single text message from my aunts and cousins calling me names. I opened a new folder on my phone and named it Evidence. My phone pinged with a new text message. It was from my mother. It was short, just a link to the Facebook post and a single sentence. Everyone knows who you really are now. Fix this, send the money, and we will take the post down. It was blackmail, pure and simple. They were holding my reputation hostage for a ransom of $5,000 a month. I felt a cold calm settle over me. The tears that had threatened to fall earlier evaporated. They had overplayed their hand. By taking this public, by inventing a pregnancy, by using the church, they had crossed a line from family drama into defamation and fraud. I wheeled myself into the home office. I turned on my desktop computer. The large monitors flickered to life. I logged into my email and found the thread with the private investigator I had hired from the hospital bed. His name was Mr. Vance, and he was expensive, discreet, and terrifyingly efficient. I sent him the screenshots. Then I typed a new message. Mr. Vance, the scope of the investigation has changed. I am not just looking for financial discrepancies anymore. I need proof of medical records regarding a pregnancy. I need pharmacy records. And I need to know exactly where my brother-in-law Kyle was on the nights he claimed to be at networking events. Dig deeper. I want everything. I hit send. Then I opened a second email to my lawyer, Marcus Sterling. Subject: defamation and libel. Marcus, I wrote. My sister has just publicly claimed a false pregnancy to solicit funds and damage my reputation. My brother-in-law is engaging in hate speech to incite harassment against me. Prepare cease and desist letters for every single person involved. And Marcus start drafting the eviction notice. I sat back in my wheelchair, the pain in my leg a dull thrum in the background. Outside the window, the sun was setting over the trees, casting long shadows across the lawn. My phone was still buzzing, vibrating against the desk like a trapped insect. Let them buzz. Let them talk. Let them enjoy their moment of viral fame. Because while they were fighting for likes on Facebook, I was preparing to fight in court. And unlike them, I didn't need the validation of the usher board or the approval of my cousins. I had the truth. And soon, I would have the receipts to prove it. I wheeled myself back out to the living room. Sarah was feeding Leo a bottle. He looked up at me, his eyes wide and trusting. I am not going to let them win, Leo, I whispered to him. They think they can shame us into submission. They think they can use the village to crush us. But they forgot one thing. I built the village, and I can tear it down. I took my phone and turned it off completely. The silence that followed was heavy, but it was mine. The war had moved from the hospital room to the internet, but the battlefield was about to shift again. And this time I was bringing reinforcements that no amount of prayer circle gossip could withstand. While the internet burned with rumors, and my sister played the victim for an audience of strangers, I turned my dining room into a war room. I did not reply to the hateful comments. I did not post a tearful rebuttal video. I did what I do best. I hired professionals. Sitting across from me at my mahogany table were two people who scared me more than my family ever could. On the left was Mr. Vance, a private investigator with eyes that seemed to have seen every sin humanity was capable of committing. On the right was Mrs. Chen, a forensic accountant who could trace a single dollar through a dozen shell companies without blinking. I slid a heavy binder across the table. Inside were 10 years of bank statements, every wire transfer, every check, every emergency cash app transaction. Find it. I told them, my voice flat. I want to know where $540,000 went. My parents live in a paid-off house. They drive cars I bought. They claim they are destitute. Show me why. Mrs. Chen opened her laptop and began scanning documents. Mr. Vance simply took out a notepad. We worked for 48 hours straight. The silence in the house was broken only by the clicking of keyboards and the occasional rustle of paper. While Bianca was updating her Facebook status about how much stress I was causing her unborn child, Mrs. Chen was dismantling the lie of my family's poverty line by line. The first domino to fall was the roof. I remembered the phone call vividly. It was 3 years ago during a heavy storm. My father had called me in a panic, claiming that water was pouring into the master bedroom. He said the roof had collapsed and they needed $15,000 immediately for an emergency replacement. I sent the money within 10 minutes. I felt good about it. I felt like a dutiful daughter protecting her parents from the elements. Mr. Vance pulled up a satellite image on his tablet and slid it over to me. Ms. Reynolds, look at this. I looked. It was a high-resolution photo of my parents' house taken last week. Notice the discoloration on the shingles, Vance said, pointing with a pen. And the moss growth on the north side. That is a 20-year-old roof, Ms. Reynolds. There are no patch marks, no new flashing, no dumpster permit was ever pulled for that address in the last decade. I stared at the image. The moss was green and thick. They never fixed it, I whispered. No, Vance confirmed. Because it never leaked. I checked the weather reports for that date 3 years ago. It drizzled. There was no storm. My stomach twisted. They had invented a catastrophe. They had played on my fear for their safety to extract $15,000. And I had thanked them for letting me help. Next came the medical records. For years, my mother had told me that my father's heart medication was not covered by insurance. She claimed he needed a specialized brand that cost $800 a month. Every month, like clockwork, I included that $800 in my transfer. I would often add extra for his cardiologist copays. Mrs. Chen pulled up a spreadsheet. I cross-referenced your father's social security number with the Medicare database, she said, her voice devoid of emotion. Your father has been on Medicare Part D for 5 years. He also has a supplemental plan that covers 100% of his prescriptions. His copay for that specific heart medication is $10. $10. I had been sending $800. Where did the money go? I asked, feeling a cold fury rising in my chest. If it didn't go to the pharmacist and it didn't go to the roofer, where is it? Mrs. Chen adjusted her glasses. That is where it gets interesting. Or perhaps disturbing is the better word. She turned her laptop screen toward me. It displayed a complex flowchart of money movement. You transferred the money to your parents' joint checking account, she explained. But they didn't spend it. Within hours of your transfers arriving, 70% of the funds were moved to a secondary account. Whose account? I asked. An account under the name K&B Consulting LLC, she said. I frowned. I didn't know any company by that name. Mr. Vance cleared his throat. It is a shell company, Ms. Reynolds, registered to Kyle Jenkins. Kyle. My brother-in-law. Doing what I asked. Kyle tells everyone he is a day trader. He says he consults for crypto startups. Vance laughed, a dry, humorless sound. Kyle Jenkins hasn't held a W-2 job in 2 years. His last employment was as a shift manager at a rental car agency, and he was fired for attendance issues. So he is unemployed, I said, the pieces starting to click together. Unemployed is an understatement, Vance said. He is a professional leech. But he is a busy man. Vance opened a file and spread several printed screenshots on the table. These are transaction logs from DraftKings BetMGM and a poker site based in Malta. The account linked to K&B Consulting is hemorrhaging money. We are talking $5,000, $10,000 a weekend on college football parlays. I looked at the numbers. They were staggering. He is a gambling addict, I said. And a bad one, Vance added. He chases his losses, and when he loses, he needs a refill. That is when your mother calls you with an emergency. I sat back in my wheelchair, feeling the blood drain from my face. It all made sense. The sudden crises, the urgent deadlines, the time my mother said the boiler exploded, the time Bianca said she needed legal fees for a fender bender. It wasn't bad luck. It was Kyle. My parents were laundering my money to fund their son-in-law's gambling addiction. Why, I asked, my voice trembling. Why would they do that? They are my parents. Why would they steal from me to give to him? Mrs. Chen pointed to another column on the spreadsheet. Because he gives them a cut, she said. Look here. Every time he wins, which is rare, he transfers a portion back to a private account, solely in your mother's name. And look at the merchant codes for that account. I leaned in. Nordstrom, Saks Fifth Avenue, Royal Caribbean. Bianca, I said. Yes, Mrs. Chen nodded. Your sister has a separate credit card paid off by this account. While Kyle gambles away the bulk of your money, your mother and sister are skimming the top for luxury goods. Those designer bags Bianca posts on Instagram. You bought them. That vintage dress she wanted to buy with your stolen card at the hospital. She probably has 3 more just like it in her closet paid for by your father's fake heart condition. I felt sick, physically ill. For 10 years I thought I was the responsible one helping my struggling family. I thought they were bad with money. I thought they were just unfortunate. But they weren't unfortunate. They were a criminal enterprise. My father the deacon. My mother the church mother. They were running a long con on their own daughter. They looked at me, the successful lawyer, the one who worked 80-hour weeks, and they didn't see a person. They saw a resource to be harvested. And when I stopped producing, when I dared to have a car accident and cut off the supply, they didn't just get angry, they panicked. That is why they are attacking you so hard online, Vance said, reading my mind. It is not about the cruise, it is about the cash flow. Kyle is likely in deep debt to bookies or credit agencies. Without your $5,000 a month, his house of cards collapses in 30 days. He is desperate. And desperate men do stupid things. Like accusing me of hating my family on Facebook, I said. Exactly. He is trying to shame you into opening the tap back up. I looked at the stack of papers. The evidence was irrefutable. It was fraud. It was theft by deception. In the eyes of the law, my parents and Kyle could be looking at felony charges. Mrs. Reynolds, Vance said softly, you have enough here to send them to prison, or at the very least to sue them into bankruptcy. What do you want to do? I looked out the window. It was dark now. The reflection in the glass showed a woman in a wheelchair, battered and broken. But inside, the fire was burning hotter than ever. They called me a monster, I said. They told the world I abandoned them. They used the church to humiliate me. I turned back to the table. I don't want to send them to prison, I said. That is too easy. They would play the martyr. They would cry to the congregation about how the justice system is unfair. I tapped the spreadsheet. I want to destroy their reputation. I want to expose them. I want everyone who liked Bianca's post, everyone who commented amen to my aunt's prayers, to see exactly who they are defending. Mrs. Chen, I said, prepare a forensic report. Make it simple, easy to read, color-coded graphs showing the flow of money from my account to the gambling sites. Mr. Vance, I continued, I want photos. I want the roof photos. I want the Medicare records. I want Kyle's employment history showing he has been unemployed for 2 years while pretending to be a consultant. I am going to sue them, yes. But first I am going to hold a family reunion of my own. I picked up my phone. I opened the group chat that I had been kicked out of 3 days ago. I couldn't post in it, but I could still see the members. I created a new group. I added my mother, my father, Bianca, Kyle. Then I added Aunt Verna, Deacon Patterson, Cousin Dante, and every single person who had commented on Bianca's post. I named the group The Receipts. I looked at Vance and Chen. Get everything ready, I said. We are going to trial. But the courtroom isn't going to be in a municipal building. It is going to be right here on this screen. I looked at the total sum at the bottom of the spreadsheet. $540,000. That wasn't just money. That was my life. That was the vacations I didn't take. That was the retirement fund I hadn't started. That was the time I spent away from my husband. Kyle was right about one thing in his Facebook comment. I was angry. But he was wrong about why. I wasn't angry because I was miserable. I was angry because I had been a fool. And the only thing more dangerous than a wealthy lawyer is a wealthy lawyer who has been humiliated and has nothing left to lose. I looked at the photo of Kyle on the report, his smug face smiling from a driver's license photo. Game over, Kyle, I whispered. You bet the house on the wrong horse. And now the house is coming down. The peace in my home lasted exactly 48 hours. It was a fragile, expensive piece purchased with security guards and new locks, or so I thought. It was Tuesday morning, and I was sitting in my home office dressed from the waist up in a silk Armani blazer, while my broken leg was propped up under the desk in sweatpants. On the massive dual monitors in front of me was the boardroom of Tanaka Industries in Tokyo. It was late evening in Japan, and I was in the final stages of closing a $20 million acquisition deal that I had been negotiating for 6 months. Mr. Tanaka was speaking, his voice calm and precise through the speakers. Miss Reynolds, we are prepared to move forward with the terms regarding the intellectual property transfer provided we can guarantee the timeline. I leaned into the microphone, my professional mask firmly in place. Mr. Tanaka, I assure you, my team has already drafted the contingencies. We can have the papers signed by. The sound of the front door slamming open echoed through the house like a gunshot. I froze. My eyes darted to the bottom corner of my screen where my camera feed showed my pristine, quiet office. I had changed the locks. I had the codes reset. How did they get in? Then I remembered. The emergency key. The one hidden inside a fake rock in the garden that I had put there 5 years ago for the dog walker and completely forgotten about. My parents knew about the rock. Jasmine. My mother's voice, shrill and hysterical, bounced off the hardwood floors of the foyer and traveled straight into my office. Jasmine, don't you dare hide from us. We know you are in there. On the screen. Mr. Tanaka stopped speaking. The 3 other Japanese executives turned to look at each other, their polite expressions faltering. I hit the mute button instantly. My heart began to hammer against my ribs, not from fear, but from a humiliation so deep it burned. I turned my wheelchair toward the office door just as it flew open. They poured into the room like a chaotic, noisy flood. My mother was leading the charge, her face blotchy and red, her hair frizzy from the humidity she despised. Behind her was my father, looking less like a deacon and more like a man whose lifeline had been cut. Bianca was there wearing sunglasses indoors, clutching a tissue to her dry eyes. And bringing up the rear was Kyle, who looked like he hadn't slept in 3 days. His shirt was wrinkled, his eyes were wild, and he smelled faintly of stale bourbon and desperation. "Get out!" I hissed, pointing at the screen where the confused faces of my most important clients were watching. "I am in a meeting. Get out right now." "I don't care about your meeting," my mother screamed, marching up to my desk. She slammed her handbag down on my paperwork right next to the microphone. "I don't care about your job, Jasmine. You have humiliated us enough. Do you know how we got home? Do you—" We had to take a Greyhound bus. A bus, Jasmine. Like common people. Behind me on the screen, I saw Mr. Tanaka lean forward, his eyebrows raised. I realized with horror that while I had muted my microphone, the noise-canceling software on the camera wasn't strong enough to block out my mother's shrieking. "Mom, stop," I whispered, trying to reach for the mouse to end the call. "No, I won't stop. You think you are so high and mighty with your fancy job and your house," she yelled, gesturing wildly. "But you have no heart. You left your pregnant sister stranded at the port. You embarrassed your father in front of the church members. You are going to fix this, and you are going to fix it now." Kyle pushed past her, his eyes darting around the room as if looking for something to pawn. "Fix it." He laughed, a manic, jagged sound. "She is going to do more than fix it. You are going to open that damn account back up, Jasmine. Do you know what you did? I had leverage on a position. I had a margin call this morning. Because you cut the line, my position liquidated. I lost $40,000 in 10 minutes because of you. I looked at the screen. Mr. Tanaka was saying something to his colleagues. One of them was shaking his head. They were witnessing the breakdown of my personal life in real time. My reputation as the cool, collected, untouchable attorney was disintegrating with every word my family shouted. I closed my eyes for a split second, made a decision, and clicked the red End Meeting button. The screen went black. The deal was likely dead. Months of work. Millions in potential revenue for my firm. Gone. I swiveled my chair around to face them. My hands were gripping the armrests so hard my knuckles were white. The silence that followed the disconnection was heavy and dangerous. You just cost me a $20 million contract, I said, my voice trembling with suppressed rage. Good, Bianca spat, stepping forward. Now you know how it feels to have something important taken away from you. You ruined my baby Moon. You stressed me out so much I almost had a miscarriage. There is no baby, Bianca, I said, my voice flat. Stop lying. Don't you dare call your sister a liar, my father bellowed, stepping into the room. He looked smaller than I remembered, stripped of the dignity he usually wore like a costume. You have become a cruel, vindictive woman, Jasmine. We raised you better than this. You raised me to be a bank, I corrected him. And the bank is closed. Why are you here? How dare you break into my house? We didn't break in, my mother scoffed. This is our daughter's house. We have a right to be here. We are family, and we are not leaving until you apologize to your sister and write a check for the cruise tickets we lost, plus damages for the emotional trauma. Apologize. I looked at them incredulous. You want me to apologize for getting hit by a truck? You want me to apologize that you chose a buffet over my surgery? We want you to apologize for being selfish, Kyle shouted, slamming his hand on my bookshelf. A framed photo of me and my husband fell over and cracked. You have everything, Jasmine. Look at this place. Look at your clothes. And you begrudge us a little trip. You are sitting on a pile of cash while I am trying to build a future for this family, and you cut my legs out from under me. I looked at Kyle. I really looked at him. I saw the tremors in his hands. I saw the sweat beading on his upper lip. You aren't building a future, Kyle, I said quietly. You are gambling away my retirement. I know about the sports betting. I know about the poker sites. I know about K&B Consulting. The room went deadly silent. My mother's face went pale. Kyle froze, his mouth hanging open. You don't know what you are talking about, Kyle stammered, his eyes shifting nervously to my father. That is a legitimate business. It is a shell company used to launder money from my parents' account to DraftKings, I said. I have the bank records. I have the IP addresses. I have everything. My father looked at my mother. Patricia. What is she talking about? My mother refused to meet his gaze. She looked at me with pure hatred. You have been spying on us. You hired someone to spy on your own family. That is illegal. That is a violation of privacy. It is forensic accounting, I said. And it is perfectly legal when I am the one investigating where my stolen money went. I am not stealing, Kyle screamed, lunging toward my desk. He looked dangerous now. The desperation had taken over. I just needed a bridge loan. I was going to pay it back. I just needed to hit one big parlay, and I would have paid you back double. But you ruined it. You ruined my streak. Open the credit card, Jasmine. Open it now. I can fix this if I have capital. He reached for my laptop, his hand grabbing the screen. Don't touch that, I said, my voice turning into a growl. Or what? He sneered, leaning over me, using his height to intimidate me in my wheelchair. You going to run away? You can't even walk. You are pathetic. You think you are so powerful, but you are just a crippled, lonely bitch who buys people because no one actually likes you. Now unlock the accounts, or I will smash this computer and everything else in this room. From the corner of my eye, I saw movement in the hallway. It was Sarah, the pediatric nurse. She was standing in the doorway holding Leo in one arm. Her other hand was holding her phone up, the camera lens pointed directly at Kyle. I looked at Sarah. I didn't say a word. I just nodded. She nodded back. The red recording light was steady. I turned back to Kyle. I looked him dead in the eye. I didn't flinch. I didn't cower. Go ahead, Kyle, I said softly. Smash it. Hit me. Do whatever you think you need to do. But before you make your next move, you should know two things. I pointed to the doorway. Number one, that is a pediatric nurse licensed by the state of Georgia. She is a mandatory reporter. And she has been live streaming this entire interaction to a secure cloud server for the last 3 minutes. Kyle spun around. He saw Sarah. He saw the phone. He turned pale. And number two, I continued, my voice gaining strength. The security guards you bypassed at the gate. They weren't asleep. I called them the second I heard the front door open. They are just waiting for my signal to enter. As if on cue, heavy footsteps pounded on the stairs. 2 large men in black uniforms appeared in the hallway behind Sarah. They were armed. They were serious. And they were looking at Kyle like he was a bug they were about to squash. My mother gasped, clutching her chest. Jasmine, you called the police on us. Private security, Mom, I said. Police take too long. Kyle backed away from the desk, holding his hands up. Whoa, calm down. We are just talking here. Family discussion. Get them out, I said to the guards. Wait, my father cried out. Jasmine, please. We have nowhere to go. The lock's on the house. Our keys don't work. I know I said. That is because it is my house, and you are trespassing. But where will we sleep? Bianca wailed. I am pregnant. I can't sleep on the street. There are plenty of shelters downtown, I said, picking up my phone to check my email. Or maybe you can use the money from the refund of the cruise tickets. Oh wait, you said they were non-refundable. That is a shame. Grab them, the lead guard said to his partner. Kyle tried to dodge, but the guard was faster. He grabbed Kyle by the back of his wrinkled collar and dragged him toward the door. Kyle shouted, cursing me, cursing the world. My mother looked at me one last time. Her eyes were filled with tears, but they weren't tears of sorrow. They were tears of a woman who had lost control. I birthed you, she spat. And I sustained you, I replied. Now we are even. They were escorted out. I heard the front door slam. I heard the shouting continue on the front lawn, then fade as the guards forced them off the property. The house fell silent again. I slumped back in my wheelchair, the adrenaline crashing out of my system. My hands were shaking. I looked at the black screen of my computer. The deal was gone. My family was gone. Sarah walked into the room. She shifted Leo to her other shoulder and came over to me. I got it all, Miss Reynolds, she said softly. Every threat, every admission of the gambling, the physical intimidation. It is all recorded. Thank you, Sarah, I whispered. She hesitated, then placed a hand on my shoulder. Are you okay? I looked at the cracked photo frame on the floor. I reached down and picked it up. The glass was shattered, but the picture underneath me and Tyrell laughing on our honeymoon was untouched. I am fine, I said, wiping a speck of dust from the photo. Actually, I am better than fine. I just got the evidence I needed to file the restraining order. I looked at the phone in Sarah's hand. Send that video to my lawyer, I said. And Sarah, yes, ma'am, order a locksmith. I want the deadbolts changed again, and get rid of that fake rock in the garden. I turned back to my desk. I had a letter of apology to write to Mr. Tanaka. I had a company to save. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't doing it to impress my parents. I was doing it for me. I thought the silence would last, that the humiliation of being dragged off my property by private security would send them scurrying back into the shadows to lick their wounds. But I underestimated the desperation of parasites who have been severed from their host. 30 minutes after the guards removed them, blue lights flashed through my front bay window. My mother had done the unthinkable. She had called the police on me. I opened the door to find 2 Atlanta Police Department officers standing there looking weary. Behind them, huddled near the squad car like refugees, were my parents, Bianca and Kyle. My mother was sobbing, a theatrical performance she had perfected over decades. "Ma'am," the older officer said, hitching up his belt, "these folks claim you have seized property belonging to them and are holding their investment funds hostage. They say there is a matter of embezzlement regarding a family trust." I looked at the officer, then at my family. My father refused to meet my eyes, but Kyle was smirking. He thought he had won. He thought that by bringing the law into this, he could bully me into submission. He thought that because I was a black woman in a wealthy neighborhood, the police would automatically assume I was the aggressor. "Officer," I said calmly, stepping aside, "there is no trust. There is no investment fund. But since they have accused me of a financial crime, I think it is time we all look at the evidence together. Please bring them in." Kyle strutted in first, creating a narrative in his head that he was reclaiming his territory. My mother followed, dabbing her eyes with a handkerchief, whispering thank you to the officers for protecting the elderly. They gathered in my living room, the room they had just been kicked out of, and stood awkwardly on the Persian rug. I didn't offer them a seat. I wheeled myself over to the media console and connected my laptop to the 85-inch television mounted above the fireplace. The screen flickered to life, casting a cold blue glow over their faces. "What is this?" Bianca sniffed, crossing her arms over her chest. "We don't want to watch a movie, Jasmine. We want our money." "It is not a movie," I said, typing in the encryption key. "It is a receipt." I hit enter. The massive spreadsheet that Mrs. Chen had compiled filled the wall. It was a grid of terror for anyone with a guilty conscience. 10 years of data. Every date, every dollar amount, every lie. I picked up a laser pointer. The red dot danced on the screen, settling on a row dated November 14th of last year. "Let's start here," I said, my voice echoing in the silent room. "Mom, do you remember this day? You called me at 3 in the morning. You were crying. You said your back pain was unbearable, that the doctors recommended an emergency spinal fusion, but the insurance wouldn't cover the deposit. You needed $20,000 immediately, or you might be paralyzed." My mother stiffened. She glanced at the officers. I remember. It was a terrifying time." I nodded. "It was terrified. I was in court that day, but I stepped out to wire you the money. I was shaking. I thought I might never see you walk again." I clicked the remote. The spreadsheet cell expanded to show the tracking data. "Here is the wire transfer leaving my account at 9 a.m., I said. "And here is the transaction on your debit card at 11:30 a.m. The screen changed. It wasn't a hospital bill. It was a scanned receipt from the Louis Vuitton boutique at Lenox Square Mall. Item: Capucine's handbag in Torillon leather. Price $6,500. Item: wool and silk trench coat. Price $4,000. Item: Star Trail ankle boots. Price $1,800. And the rest," I continued mercilessly, "went to a 5-star spa weekend at the St. Regis." I turned to look at my mother. Her face was a mask of gray ash. The officer shifted his weight, looking from the screen to the woman who had just claimed to be destitute. "You didn't have surgery, Mom," I said softly. "You went shopping. You used my fear of losing you to buy a purse for Bianca." Bianca gasped. "I didn't know Mom said she saved up for that bag." I moved the laser pointer down. "Let's look at another one. Dad, this is for you." My father shrank into his jacket. February 12th. "You told me the transmission dropped out of the Mercedes I bought you. You said you were stranded on the side of the road. You needed $15,000 for a complete rebuild and a rental car." I clicked the remote. "Here's the transfer to your account. And here, 5 minutes later, is the transfer from your account to a digital wallet." The screen displayed the logo of BetMGM, a sports betting app. Transaction: $15,000. User King. Kyle. _ 88. I looked at Kyle. "You bet on the Super Bowl," I said. "You took the money I sent to fix my father's car, and you put it on the Kansas City Chiefs. And you lost." The room was so quiet, I could hear the hum of the refrigerator in the kitchen. The police officers were no longer looking at me with suspicion. They were looking at the screen with the fascination of investigators who had just been handed a smoking gun. It goes on like this for 300 pages, I said, scrolling down. The roof repair that never happened, DraftKings. The dental surgery, online poker. The charity donation to the church building fund, Gucci. I spun my wheelchair around to face them. $540,000, I said. That is the total. That is $500,000 that I worked for, that I bled for, that I sacrificed my marriage and my peace of mind for. And you didn't need it. You stole it. My mother found her voice first. It was a screech, high and defensive. We didn't steal it. You gave it to us. You are our daughter. It is your duty to take care of us. How dare you track our spending? How dare you embarrass us like this? Bianca burst into tears, pointing a shaking finger at me. You are calculating with family. Who does that? You are sitting there with your spreadsheets and your receipts like some kind of robot. We are flesh and blood. So what if we bought a few nice things? You have so much. Why are you so greedy? Greedy. I laughed, a sharp, bitter sound. I am greedy because I don't want my money used to fund Kyle's gambling addiction. That is when Kyle snapped. The humiliation of being exposed in front of the police, in front of his wife, was too much for his fragile ego. He stepped forward, his face twisted into a snarl that revealed the true nature of the man I had allowed into my family. "Shut up!" he roared, his voice booming off the walls. "Just shut up!" He pointed at the screen. "Who do you think you are? You think that money makes you special. You think because you opened your legs for some rich corporate job that you get to dictate how we live," Kyle, the officer, warned, stepping forward and placing a hand on his holster. "No," Kyle shouted, ignoring the cop. "I am sick of this. I am the man of this family. Me. I make the decisions. Jasmine is just a lonely, bitter woman who can't keep a husband, so she tries to control us with her checkbook." He turned to me, his eyes bulging. "That money belongs to the family, Jasmine. It belongs to us. You are the big sister. You are supposed to sacrifice. That is your job. But no, you want to play boss. You want to act like you are better than us because you act white and talk white and live in this white house." He spat on my floor. "You are nothing," he hissed. "You are just a wallet, and you have no right to close. You owe us. You owe us for every year you spent thinking you were better than where you came from." The misogyny, the entitlement, the sheer hatred in his voice hung in the air like toxic smoke. He had finally said the quiet part out loud. He didn't see me as a person. He saw me as a resource that had the audacity to gain consciousness. I looked at the officer. "Did you get that statement?" "Officer," I asked calmly. "Because I believe claiming ownership of funds obtained through deception is a confession of fraud." The officer nodded grimly. He pulled out his handcuffs. "Kyle Jenkins, put your hands behind your back." What? Kyle blinked, the rage suddenly replaced by confusion. "What are you doing? I didn't do anything. It is a civil matter." "You just admitted to misappropriating funds on camera, son," the officer said, snapping the cuffs on. "And based on this spreadsheet, we are looking at grand larceny by deception. This is well over the felony limit." My mother screamed as the officer grabbed Kyle's arm. "Don't touch him. He is a good boy. Jasmine, tell them to stop. Tell them it was a gift." I looked at my mother. She was pleading with me, begging me to save the man who had just called me a nothing. She was willing to sacrifice me again and again to protect the men in her life who did nothing but take. "No, Mom," I said. "It wasn't a gift. It was a crime." The second officer stepped toward my father. "Sir, ma'am, I am going to need you to come down to the station as well. We need to sort out who knew what about these transactions." My father looked at the screen at the list of lies he had told me. For a moment I saw a flicker of shame in his eyes, but it was quickly replaced by the cold, hard look of self-preservation. I didn't know, he stammered, pointing at Kyle. It was him. He told me to say those things. He said Jasmine had plenty of money. He said she wouldn't miss it. You coward, Kyle shouted as he was dragged toward the door. You begged me for that money. You wanted that rental car just as much as I wanted to place the bet. The family began to eat itself alive right there in my living room. Accusations flew back and forth. Bianca screamed that she was stressed. My mother screamed that she was fainting. Kyle screamed that he was innocent. I watched them go. I watched the police escort my entire family out of my house for the second time that day. As the door closed, silence finally returned. But this time it wasn't empty. It was heavy with the weight of the truth. I looked at the spreadsheet still glowing on the wall. The red numbers seemed to bleed down the screen. $540,000. It was the price of my freedom. And looking at the empty room, I realized it was the best money I had ever spent. I picked up my phone and dialed Mrs. Chen. "It is done," I said. "The police have the data." "Good," she replied. "Do you want me to file the civil suit for restitution?" "No," I said, watching the blue lights fade from my window. "Not yet. First, I have one more stop to make." "Where the nursing home?" I said. "I think it is time Grandpa Otis knew exactly how his son has been spending the family inheritance." I hung up. The tears finally came then, hot and fast. Not for the money, but for the little girl who used to believe that if she just bought the right gift, if she just fixed the right problem, her mother would look at her with love instead of calculation. That little girl was gone, and the woman sitting in the wheelchair was done paying for ghosts. The chaos in my living room had reached a fever pitch. Kyle was in handcuffs shouting obscenities that would make a sailor blush, while my mother was wailing like a paid mourner at a funeral. But amidst the noise and the flashing blue lights outside, I noticed something shift in my father. Jasmine Reynolds, the man who had spent 60 years cultivating an image of dignified religious authority, was unraveling. He wasn't looking at Kyle. He wasn't looking at his weeping wife. His eyes were locked on my phone, which was still resting on the arm of my wheelchair. That phone was the vault. It held the forensic accounting reports, the text messages, the recordings of their threats, and the direct line to the private investigators who were currently dismantling his life. In his desperate, panicked mind, he must have thought that if he could just destroy the device, he could destroy the truth. "Give me that phone, Jasmine," he growled, his voice low and unrecognizable. I looked at him, seeing not a father but a cornered animal. "You are not touching my property, Dad. Step back." He didn't step back. He lunged. For a man of his age, he moved with a terrifying burst of adrenaline. He rushed toward my wheelchair, his hand outstretched, his face twisted into a mask of pure, unadulterated malice. It was a violation that cut deeper than any financial theft. My own father was physically attacking me to protect his lies. I flinched, raising my arms to protect my face, bracing for the impact. "Desmond, stop!" my mother screamed, but it was too late. He was inches away from me, but he never made contact. Suddenly, the heavy double doors of the library on the far side of the room swung open with a loud, commanding boom that silenced everyone instantly. A voice, deep and gravelly like grinding stones, thundered through the room. "Sit down, Desmond, before I put you down." My father froze in midair, his hand hovering over my phone. He turned his head slowly, terror replacing the rage in his eyes. There, emerging from the shadows of the library, was a sight that made my mother gasp and clutch her chest. It was my grandfather, Grandpa Otis. The family narrative for the last 3 years had been that Grandpa Otis was senile. They told everyone he was losing his mind, that he was comfortably resting in the Shady Pines nursing home, unaware of the world around him. They treated him like a piece of furniture, something to be dusted off for holidays, and ignored the rest of the year. But the man sitting in the motorized wheelchair in my doorway was not senile. He was sitting upright, his spine stiff as a rod. He was wearing his vintage military jacket freshly pressed, and his eyes, the same dark, piercing eyes that I had inherited, were sharp, clear, and burning with a righteous fire. Behind him stood my private nurse Sarah, who had evidently been helping him all along. "Dad," my father stammered, backing away from me as if he had seen a ghost. "What? What are you doing here? We thought you thought I was drooling in a cup while you spent my legacy." Grandpa Otis cut him off, rolling his wheelchair forward into the center of the room. The police officers, sensing the shift in power, stepped back respectfully to let the elder pass. "I have been here since yesterday," Desmond Grandpa said, his voice steady and cold. "Jasmine picked me up. She told me she needed help. She told me she was in trouble. And unlike you, when my family calls for help, I answer." My mother stepped forward, trying to compose herself, trying to put on the charm she used to manipulate him. "Oh, Daddy Otis, thank goodness you are here. Jasmine is having a breakdown. She is confused. She is attacking us. She had poor Kyle arrested. You have to talk some sense into her." Grandpa Otis turned his gaze to my mother. He didn't blink. He didn't smile. He looked at her with a disappointment so profound it sucked the air out of the room. "Silence, Patricia," he commanded. "I have been sitting in that library for 24 hours. I have watched the camera feeds. I heard every word you said in this living room." He pointed a shaking finger at my father. "I saw you, Desmond. I saw the footage from the hospital. I saw you look at your daughter broken and bleeding on a stretcher and check your watch because you were worried about missing a buffet." "Dad, it wasn't like that," my father pleaded, sweat pouring down his face. "We had tickets. It was a misunderstanding. It was abandonment." Grandpa roared, slamming his hand on the armrest of his chair. "You left my granddaughter alone to go on a boat. You left my great-grandson to be raised by strangers. I raised you to be a man, Desmond. I raised you to protect your blood. And you traded your honor for a vacation." He turned his eyes to Kyle, who was standing by the door in handcuffs, looking small and pathetic. "And you," Grandpa spat, looking at him with undisguised disgust. "The consultant. The investor. I have watched you for years, boy. I watched you walk around this family like you owned the place. I saw you sneer at Jasmine's success. I saw you make jokes about her working too hard while you sat on your backside spending money you never earned." Kyle tried to speak, but Grandpa cut him off. "I heard what you said," Grandpa continued, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. "I heard you call my granddaughter nothing. I heard you say she owed you because she tried to be better. You think because you are a white man in a black family that we should be grateful for your presence? You think we exist to fund your gambling." He rolled closer to Kyle, staring him down. "You are a parasite. You are a thief. And you are a fool. Because you didn't know who really held the keys to the kingdom." Grandpa turned back to me. His expression softened instantly. The fire in his eyes was replaced by a deep, aching love. "Jasmine," he said softly, "I am so sorry. I am sorry I didn't step in sooner. I thought letting them handle their own affairs would make them grow up. I was wrong." He reached into the pocket of his jacket and pulled out a thick, leather-bound book. It wasn't a Bible. It was a ledger, an old-fashioned property ledger that he had kept since the 1960s. He looked at my parents. "You two seem to have forgotten something very important," Grandpa said, tapping the book. "You live in a house on Peachtree Lane, a house you have lived in for 30 years. "Yes, Dad. That is our house," my father said, trying to regain some footing. "You gave it to us. I let you live there," Grandpa corrected him. "I let you raise your children there. But if you check the deed at the county recorder's office, you will find that the title was never transferred. I kept it in my name. I kept it because I knew deep down that a day might come when you would forget who you are." My mother gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. "No, you can't mean—" And the lake house, Grandpa continued, ignoring her. "The one Kyle likes to take his friends to. The one he tells people is his summer estate. That is in my name too." He opened the ledger and ripped out a page. He crumpled it up and threw it at my father's feet. You have forgotten the most basic rule of this family, Desmond. We take care of our own. You didn't just fail to take care of Jasmine, you preyed on her. You ate her harvest and then complained about the taste. Grandpa looked at the police officers. Gentlemen, he said, his voice filled with authority. Whatever charges my granddaughter is pressing, I am doubling them. That man in handcuffs has been driving a vehicle registered to me. I am reporting it stolen. Kyle's eyes bulged. You gave me the keys, I gave you permission to drive it to church, Grandpa said. Not to a bookie. He turned back to my parents. And as for you two, I am making some changes to my estate planning. Effective immediately. My father fell to his knees. It was pathetic. The man who had tried to attack me seconds ago was now groveling on the floor. Dad, please. Don't do this. We are your children. We made a mistake. We will pay Jasmine back. We will make it right. You can't pay her back, Grandpa said. Because you are bankrupt. You have been bankrupt of morals for a long time, and now you are going to be bankrupt of money. He looked at me. Jasmine, he said, do you want them in your house? No, Grandpa, I said, my voice shaking. I want them gone. You heard her, Grandpa said to the officers. Get them out of here. And tell them if they set foot on the Peachtree property tonight, they will be arrested for trespassing there too, because I am changing the locks on that house within the hour. My mother wailed, a sound of pure despair. Dad, you can't evict us. We have nowhere to go. You have a bus ticket, Grandpa said, cold, echoing their own words from earlier. I suggest you use it. Maybe the fresh air will help you remember how to be human beings. The officers escorted them out. I watched as my father, broken and weeping, was led away, leaving the crumpled paper on the floor. My mother looked back at me one last time, expecting me to save her, expecting the checkbook to open. But I just took Grandpa's hand. His skin was paper thin, but his grip was iron. We sat there in the silence of the aftermath, 2 generations of survivors. The house was quiet. The parasites were gone. And for the first time since the accident, I didn't feel like a victim. I felt like a Reynolds. The real kind. The kind that Grandpa Otis had built. You did good, baby girl, Grandpa whispered, patting my hand. You stood tall. Now let's look at this ledger. We have some work to do. The blue lights of the police cruisers faded into the distance, taking the noise and the shame of my family with them. The silence that settled over my living room was thick, but it was no longer heavy with tension. It was the heavy, grounding silence of truth. I sat in my wheelchair, my hands resting on my lap, looking at the man who had just saved me. Grandpa Otis sat across from me, his motorized chair humming softly as he adjusted his position. He looked tired. The fire that had fueled his confrontation with my father was dimming, replaced by the weary sadness of a patriarch who had outlived his legacy's integrity. He held the leather folder in his lap like a shield. It was old, the edges frayed, and the leather cracked with age, smelling faintly of pipe tobacco and cedar wood. It was a stark contrast to the high-tech digital evidence I had just displayed on the television screen. I had used spreadsheets and forensic algorithms to expose their crimes. Grandpa Otis had something far more dangerous. He had history. I watched as his trembling hands undid the string tie of the folder. He didn't look at me immediately. He looked at the papers inside, running his thumb over the yellowed edges of a document that looked like it had been typed on a typewriter decades ago. Jasmine, he said, his voice gravelly and low, do you know why I never liked that house on Peachtree Lane? I blinked, confused by the question. The house on Peachtree was the family seat. It was where I took my first steps. It was where we had every Christmas dinner. It was the symbol of my parents' success as pillars of the community. I thought you liked it, Grandpa, I said softly. You were there every Sunday for dinner. I was there to inspect the property, he corrected me, finally looking up. His eyes were dark pools of sorrow. I was there to make sure they hadn't burned it down yet. He pulled a document from the folder and slid it across the coffee table toward me. Read the deed, Jasmine. Read the name on the grantor line and the name on the grantee line. I leaned forward, picking up the paper. It was a warranty deed dated 30 years ago. I scanned the legal jargon, my lawyer brain kicking in automatically. I looked for my father's name, Desmond Reynolds. I looked for my mother's name, Patricia Reynolds. They weren't there. The grantee, the owner of the property at 4500 Peachtree Lane, was listed as Otis Reynolds. I looked up at him, my mouth slightly open. Grandpa, this says you own the house. But Mom and Dad always said. They lied. Otis cut in sharply. They have been lying since 1994. He leaned back, his eyes unfocused as he traveled back in time. 30 years ago, your father came to me. He had just married Patricia. He wanted to look like a big man. He wanted to look successful for the church folks and for Patricia's friends. He found that house. It was way out of his price range. He didn't have the credit, and he certainly didn't have the down payment. He begged me to co-sign. Grandpa shook his head slowly. I knew then, Jasmine. I knew my son was weak. I saw how he looked at money not as a tool, but as a costume. If I had co-signed, he would have defaulted in a year and dragged my credit down with him. So I made a decision. I bought the house. Cash. I told him he could live there rent-free as long as he paid the taxes and the upkeep. I told him it was his inheritance in advance, provided he acted like a man and took care of it. And he didn't. I whispered, realizing the depth of the deception. He never paid a dime in property taxes. Otis scoffed. I paid them. Every year. For 30 years. He would send me a check sometimes, claiming it was for the bill. But half the time the checks bounced. I let it slide because of you. Because of Bianca. I didn't want my granddaughters on the street. I looked at the deed again. My entire childhood, the stability I thought my parents provided was a gift from this man. A gift they had claimed as their own achievement. And it gets worse, Otis said, pulling another document from the file. This one was a title for a property in Lake Lanier. The lake house. The famous lake house that Kyle posted on Instagram every weekend. The summer estate, where my mother hosted her prayer circles. Kyle had even told me once that he was thinking of leveraging the equity in the lake house to fund a tech startup. I looked at the title. Otis Reynolds. He told people it was his, didn't he? Grandpa asked, a cynical smile touching his lips. That boy Kyle. I heard him at the barber shop one day. He was bragging about his boat slip. He was bragging about the renovations he was planning. It is a fishing cabin. Grandpa, I said, a laugh bubbling up in my throat despite the seriousness of the moment. It is a 2-bedroom cabin with a dock. It is my fishing cabin, Otis said firmly. I bought it in '72 when I came back from Vietnam. It was my sanctuary. When Kyle started dating Bianca, he asked to borrow the keys for a weekend. He never gave them back. He changed the gate code. He started treating it like his frat house. I stared at the papers. My parents and my sister and her husband owned nothing. Absolutely nothing. They were squatters in a kingdom built by the man they had dismissed as senile. Why now, Grandpa? I asked. Why did you wait until tonight to tell me? Otis sighed, a sound that seemed to rattle in his chest. Because I kept hoping, Jasmine. A father always hopes his children will do better. I thought maybe when you got successful, Desmond would feel some pride and step up. Instead, he just got lazier. He saw you as his new meal ticket. He stopped asking me for money and started preying on you. He reached out and tapped the ledger. But tonight, when I saw that footage of you in the hospital, when I saw my son check his watch while his daughter was bleeding, that was the end. A man who abandons his child forfeits his inheritance. That is the law of nature, and it is the law of Otis Reynolds. He pulled one final document from the back of the folder. This one was new. The paper was crisp and white, the ink fresh. It was stamped with the seal of a notary public, dated this very morning. I called my attorney at 6 a.m., Otis said. He met me at the nursing home before I came here. This is my new last will and testament, and this is the formation document for the Reynolds Family Trust. I took the document. My eyes scanned the clauses quickly. I revoke all prior wills and codicils. I intentionally make no provision for my son Desmond Reynolds or my daughter-in-law Patricia Reynolds. I skip to the distribution section. All real property, including the residence at Peachtree Lane and the property at Lake Lanier, shall be transferred immediately into the Reynolds Family Trust. And then the line that changed everything. The sole beneficiary of the trust shall be Leo Reynolds, my great-grandson. I looked up at Grandpa, tears stinging my eyes. You left it to Leo. He needs a future, Otis said softly, and he needs protection from the vultures. I looked back down at the paper. The sole trustee with full power of attorney and absolute discretion over all assets and occupancy rights shall be Jasmine Reynolds. I stopped breathing for a second. The trustee. That meant I controlled everything. I controlled the house my parents slept in. I controlled the lake house Kyle partied in. I controlled the land, the equity, the legacy. You are giving me the power to evict them, I whispered. I am giving you the power to clean house, Otis corrected me. You are the only one with the backbone to do it. Desmond is weak. Patricia is greedy. Bianca is lost. But you have the fire. He leaned forward, his dark eyes locking onto mine. They think they are homeless because the police kicked them out of your house tonight, but they don't know the half of it. When they try to go back to Peachtree Lane, they are going to find out that they don't live there anymore either. Not unless you say so. The weight of the responsibility settled onto my shoulders. It was heavy, yes, but it wasn't crushing. It felt like armor. For 10 years I had been the daughter begging for approval. I had been the safety net they abused. Now in the stroke of a pen, the dynamic had completely inverted. I wasn't just the bank anymore. I was the landlord, Grandpa. I said, my voice trembling slightly. This is war. If I enforce this, they will never forgive me. They will hate me for the rest of their lives. Otis reached out and took my hand. His skin was rough, calloused from years of hard work that my father had never known. They already hate you, baby girl, he said, speaking the hard truth that I needed to hear. They hate you because you shine and they don't. They hate you because you remind them of their own failures. Letting them use you won't make them love you. It just makes them disrespect you. He squeezed my hand. Respect yourself, Jasmine. Protect your son. And kick the squatters out. I looked at the document one last time. Trustee Jasmine Reynolds. It was more than a title. It was a gavel. I looked over at the digital clock on the wall. It was 9 p.m. My parents were likely sitting in a holding cell or a cheap motel lobby right now, furious, blaming me, plotting their return to the comfort of their home on Peachtree Lane. They didn't know that the home didn't exist for them anymore. I picked up my phone. I dialed Marcus Sterling, my ruthless attorney. Marcus, I said when he answered, I have a new document for you to file in the morning, and I need you to hire a property management crew. For what address, Ms. Reynolds, he asked. For 4500 Peachtree Lane, I said, my voice steady and cold. I need the locks changed, the perimeter secured, and a notice to vacate posted on the front door by sunrise. There was a pause on the line. Then I could hear the smile in Marcus's voice. Consider it done. Who is the owner of record, the Reynolds Family Trust? I said, looking at Grandpa Otis, who nodded at me with pride. And I am the boss. I hung up the phone. The transformation was complete. The victim who had been left bleeding in a car wreck was gone. In her place sat the matriarch of a new dynasty, and the first order of business was closing the gates. The sun rose over Atlanta the next morning, with a brilliance that felt mocking to my parents but miraculous to me. I sat at the head of the dining table in the house on Peachtree Lane. This was not my house. It was the house my grandfather built, the house my parents had pretended to own for 30 years, and the house that I now legally controlled as the sole trustee of the Reynolds Family Trust. My lawyer, Marcus Sterling, sat to my right. He had arrived at 7 in the morning with a briefcase full of documents that would redefine the geometry of our family forever. Opposite us sat my parents, Desmond and Patricia. They looked like ghosts. The night in the holding cell before their lawyer, paid for by me in a final act of charity, got them released, had stripped away their veneer of respectability. My mother's hair was unkempt, her eyes swollen. My father stared into his coffee cup as if the answers to his failures were swimming in the black liquid. Bianca and Kyle were not at the table. They were packing. Or rather, they were throwing things into garbage bags in the guest wing, a process I was monitoring via the security cameras on my iPad. "This is a standard residential lease agreement," Marcus said, sliding a thick document toward my parents. His voice was smooth, professional, and completely devoid of sympathy. My father looked at the paper, his hands trembling. "A lease," he whispered. "You are making us sign a lease for our own home. It is not your home, Desmond." I said, my voice steady. "It is an asset of the trust, and as trustee, it is my fiduciary duty to ensure the occupants are reliable." I leaned forward. "Here are the terms. The rent is set at $0 per month. You may continue to reside here for the remainder of your natural lives, provided you maintain the property standards and pay the utility bills. However, there is an addendum." I pointed to the final page. Clause 14b. The occupants agree that no other persons shall reside on the premises for more than 3 consecutive nights in any calendar month. Specifically, the individuals known as Bianca Jenkins and Kyle Jenkins are permanently barred from establishing residency. My mother looked up, her face crumpling. "Jasmine, you can't do this. Bianca is your sister. She has nowhere to go. They are broke. If we don't take them in, they will be on the street." "Then let them be on the street," I said, feeling a cold hardness in my chest that surprised even me. "Or if you prefer, you can join them. If you sign this lease, you are agreeing to cut off all financial support to them. No more sneaking cash. No more paying their credit card bills. If I find one unauthorized transfer from your accounts, which I now monitor, this lease is void, and you will be evicted within 30 days. My mother looked at my father. She was waiting for him to fight to be the patriarch to protect his favorite child. But Jasmine Reynolds was a broken man. He picked up the pen. He didn't look at his wife. He didn't look at me. He just signed his name. "Desmond," my mother gasped. "He is not going to save you, Mom," I said. "He is saving himself. Now sign it, or I call the movers." With a sob that sounded like it tore her throat, my mother signed. She chose the roof over her head, over the daughter she had spoiled for 28 years. It was a brutal choice, but it was the one I knew she would make. Survival always trumps loyalty for people like them. Just then, the sound of heavy boots echoed in the hallway. Kyle stormed into the dining room, dragging a suitcase that was bursting at the seams. Bianca followed him, clutching her collection of designer purses like they were life rafts. "This is illegal!" Kyle shouted, his face purple with rage. "You can't kick us out without 30 days' notice. I know my rights. I am a tenant." Marcus cleared his throat. "Actually, Mr. Jenkins, under Georgia law, you are considered a guest, not a tenant, as you have never paid rent and have no written agreement. Furthermore, given the restraining order Ms. Reynolds filed this morning regarding the threat of violence you made against her yesterday, your presence here is a violation of her safety. You have 1 hour to vacate the premises before the sheriff arrives to arrest you." Kyle dropped the suitcase. He looked at me, his eyes wild. He looked at my parents. "You are just going to let her do this?" he screamed at them. "After everything I did for this family?" My father finally looked up. "Everything you did. You gambled away my retirement, Kyle. You stole my dignity. Get out of my house." Kyle laughed, a manic, jagged sound. He turned to me. "You think you won, don't you, Jasmine? You think because you have the money you can destroy me. I will rebuild. I am an entrepreneur. I will be back, and when I am going to buy this house out from under you just to burn it down." I didn't blink. I didn't flinch. I just opened a folder on the table. "Kyle," I said softly, You aren't going to rebuild anything, because you are going to be too busy trying to stay out of prison. I slid a single sheet of paper toward him. This is a draft of a civil lawsuit for fraud, conversion, and theft by deception. The total amount listed is $270,000. That is exactly 50% of the money you misappropriated. I watched his eyes scan the document. I saw the color drain from his face. I am not unreasonable, I continued. I know you don't have the money. I know you are drowning in debt to bookies. So here is my offer. You disappear. You leave Atlanta. You never contact me, my son, or my grandfather again. If you do that, I will keep this lawsuit in my desk drawer. I paused, letting the silence stretch. But if I ever see your face again, if you ever post my name on social media, if you ever come within 500 feet of this property, I will file this suit, and I will hand over the full forensic accounting report to the district attorney. You won't just be broke, Kyle. You will be an inmate. Kyle looked at the paper. He looked at the two large private security guards standing by the front door. The arrogance that had defined him for years evaporated, leaving behind only the pathetic small man he had always been. He didn't lunge this time. He didn't scream. He knew he was beaten. "Come on, Bianca," he muttered, grabbing his suitcase. Bianca looked at our mother. "Mom, please." My mother turned her face away, staring out the window at the garden she no longer owned. Bianca let out a wail of despair and followed her husband out the front door. The sound of their exit was the sweetest melody I had ever heard. The room was quiet again. My parents sat frozen, two statues in a museum of their own failures. I stood up. My leg ached, but I felt taller than I had in years. "I will have the property manager inspect the house once a month," I told them. "Do not change the locks. Do not paint the walls. And do not ask me for money." I turned to Marcus. "We are done here." As I wheeled myself toward the door, my father spoke. His voice was a rasp. "Jasmine." I stopped, but I didn't turn around. "Why?" he asked. "Why didn't you just evict us too? Why let us stay?" I looked at the grand staircase, the one I had fallen down as a child, the one where I had posed for prom pictures alone because they were too busy with Bianca. "Because, Dad," I said, "evicting you would give you a chance to play the victim. It would give you a story to tell at church about your ungrateful daughter. Keeping you here in a house you don't own, living by my rules. That is a daily reminder of who really holds the power." I wheeled out into the morning sun, leaving them in the shadow of my grandfather's legacy. The air tasted crisp and clean. It tasted like victory. 1 hour later, I sat in my SUV, parked at the end of the driveway on Peachtree Lane. I wasn't leaving yet. I had one final act of theater to oversee. Bianca and Kyle were standing on the curb. They had a mountain of luggage around them. They were arguing. I couldn't hear the words, but I could see the body language. Bianca was crying and gesturing at her phone, likely trying to call an Uber that she couldn't afford. Kyle was pacing, kicking at the grass. Then the tow truck turned the corner. It wasn't just any tow truck, it was a heavy-duty repo vehicle. I had tipped off the bank that held the note on Kyle's leased Range Rover regarding his location 3 hours ago. I watched as the truck backed up to the black SUV parked on the street. Kyle started screaming. He ran toward the driver, waving his arms. The driver, a burly man who had clearly dealt with worse than Kyle Jenkins, simply ignored him and hooked up the chains. The neighbors were coming out now. The Johnsons from across the street, the ones who had judged me at the airport, were standing on their porch, coffee mugs in hand, watching the spectacle. Mrs. Gable from next door was peering through her blinds. This was the death of their reputation. This was the moment the facade finally cracked for the entire world to see. Kyle tried to grab the door handle of the car, but the truck began to lift it. The alarm started blaring, a rhythmic honking that drew even more attention. Bianca sat down on one of her Louis Vuitton suitcases and put her head in her hands. She was finally realizing that the purse didn't matter if you didn't have a car to put it in. I watched the truck drive away, dragging the symbol of Kyle's fake success with it. I watched them stand there, surrounded by their bags, looking small and defeated. I rolled down my window. Kyle looked up. He saw me. His eyes locked onto mine. There was no anger left in them, only fear. I didn't smile. I didn't wave. I simply put my car in drive and pulled away slowly. I left them there on the curb, exactly where they had left me and my parents at the port. The circle was complete. The karma was delivered. I drove toward the nursing home to pick up Grandpa Otis for lunch. We had a lot to celebrate. My parents remained inside the house, peering through the curtains. I knew what their life would be like now. They would live in that beautiful empty museum. They would go to church and pretend everything was fine. But every time they turned a key in the lock, every time they walked across the floorboards, they would know it wasn't theirs. They were guests in my world now. And they would live every single day with the knowledge that they had traded a diamond for a handful of glass. 1 year later. The backyard of my new house in Buckhead was filled with laughter. It wasn't the polite, strained laughter of my parents' dinner parties. It was loud, genuine, belly-shaking laughter. Streamers hung from the oak trees, dancing in the gentle breeze. A banner strung across the patio read, "Happy First Birthday, Leo." I stood on the deck, holding a glass of iced tea, watching the scene below. There were my colleagues from the law firm, men and women who had respected me for my brain, not my checkbook. There was Nurse Sarah, who had become Leo's godmother and one of my closest friends. There was Marcus Sterling, who had traded his suit for a polo shirt and was currently trying to explain the rules of cornhole to Grandpa Otis. And there was Grandpa. He sat in his wheelchair at the head of the table, wearing a #1 great-grandpa hat that I had bought him. He was holding Leo on his lap. Leo was smashing a piece of birthday cake with his chubby fists, smearing blue icing all over Grandpa's vintage military jacket. Most people would have been horrified. Grandpa Otis was laughing so hard his shoulders shook. He looked up at me, his eyes sparkling with joy. "He has got a grip like a marine jasmine," he shouted. "Look at this mess." I smiled, feeling a warmth in my chest that had nothing to do with the sun. There were no empty seats. There was no tension. There was no one checking their watch or making snide comments about the food. My parents weren't there. I had sent them a card with a photo of Leo, but no invitation. They had sent a gift, a generic toy ordered from Amazon, which I had donated to charity. Bianca and Kyle were somewhere in Florida, according to the last report from the private investigator. They were still together, miserable and broke, grifting their way through a new town. I didn't miss them. I walked down the steps and joined the party. I took a napkin and wiped the icing off Leo's cheek. He looked at me with those big, trusting eyes, my eyes, Grandpa's eyes, and giggled. I looked around at the faces of the people who had shown up for me. The people who had visited me in rehab when I was learning to walk again. The people who had brought casseroles and offered to babysit without asking for a dime. I looked into the camera lens of the videographer I had hired to capture this day. For a long time, I thought family was something you were born into, like a blood type or a zip code. I thought it was a debt you had to pay for the rest of your life. I was wrong. I kissed Leo's forehead. Blood is just biology. Family is behavior. Family is the people who answer the phone at 3 a.m. Family is the people who don't leave you at the port. Family is the people who stand by your hospital bed and tell you that you are enough just as you are. I looked over at Grandpa Otis, who was now teaching Leo how to salute. "I lost the family I was born with," I said softly. "But I found the family I deserved. And looking at this backyard, at this love, at this peace, I know I made the right trade." I smiled, a full, radiant smile that reached all the way to my soul. I am Jasmine Reynolds. I am a mother. I am a survivor. And I am finally truly free. This journey taught me that blood is biology, but loyalty is a choice. For years I confused transaction with affection, thinking I could buy my place at the table. But the crash revealed a harsh truth. You cannot save people who only love you for what you provide. True family isn't about who shares your DNA, but who shares your pain and stands by your side when the checks stop coming. Walking away wasn't an act of cruelty, it was an act of survival. I finally broke the cycle of abuse to build a legacy of genuine love for my son. Have you ever had to fire your own family to save your peace? I want to hear your story in the comments below. Please like and subscribe for more stories of resilience and justice.